Dance with me, right now. So that man across the room thinks I moved on." The stranger turned slowly. His eyes found Ryan instantly, the ex-husband laughing with his new woman, deliberately loud, deliberately visible. Then those same eyes came back to her, dark, unreadable, carrying the specific weight of a man who had seen everything and feared nothing. He didn't smile, didn't hesitate, didn't ask a single question. He simply set his drink down, extended his hand and said, "One condition. You do this for yourself, not for him." Sophia had no idea she was whispering to the most dangerous man in New York. Before we begin, if this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go. The night had been a mistake from the beginning. Sophia Bennett knew it the moment she walked through those glass doors, and the music hit her like a wall, loud, relentless. The kind of sound that fills every empty space inside you, whether you want it to or not. She hadn't been inside a place like this in over a year, maybe longer. The last time she had dressed up, done her hair, worn something other than scrubs and exhaustion, she had still been someone's wife. She had still believed that meant something. It didn't. She found out it didn't on a Tuesday afternoon in their kitchen, in the apartment she had helped pay for, when she discovered text messages on Ryan's phone that explained everything she had been too trusting to see before. 3 years. 3 years of covering his shifts when he called in sick, of eating dinner alone because he was working late, of telling herself that every marriage had rough patches and that her rough patch was just longer than most. 3 years of making herself smaller so he would feel bigger. All of it undone in 30 seconds of reading. She hadn't cried in the kitchen that day. She had gone very still, the way she did sometimes in the emergency room when a situation turned critical and there was no room for feeling, only doing. She had put his phone face down on the counter. She had walked to their bedroom, pulled out the suitcase she kept under the bed and started packing. Not his things, hers. Because she had learned a long time ago that when something is broken beyond repair, you don't stand there holding the pieces. You leave. The divorce had been finalized 4 months ago, and Sophia had spent those 4 months working double shifts at Mount Sinai, studying for her recertification exams, eating takeout over textbooks at 11 o'clock at night, and telling herself she was fine, that she was healing. That time worked the way people said it did, linearly, steadily toward something better. Then her coworker Dana had called her that afternoon. "You are coming out tonight," Dana had said, not asked, stated. "I don't want to hear about your exam. I don't want to hear about your double shift tomorrow. I am picking you up at 8 o'clock, and you are going to remember that you are 30 years old and gorgeous and completely wasting it by studying pharmacology on a Friday night." "I'm fine," Sophia had said. "People who are fine don't say they're fine that fast," Dana had said. 8 o'clock. Wear the blue dress. She had worn the blue dress. It was old. She had bought it 3 years ago. For a company dinner Ryan had eventually canceled at the last minute. She had never actually worn it anywhere. Standing in front of her bathroom mirror that evening, she had looked at herself for a long time. There were shadows under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite cover. Her collarbone was sharper than it used to be. But her eyes were still hers. Still clear. Still the same hazel that her mother always called gold and green, the color of late October. She had thought, I still exist. It seemed like a small thing to have to remind yourself of. But it wasn't small at all. Dana had been called away almost immediately after they arrived. A friend of a friend, some drama about a broken engagement, the kind of thing that required urgent female attention and a corner booth. Sophia had found herself alone at the bar with a glass of wine she barely touched, watching the room with the careful assessment of someone trained to read situations fast and stay calm inside them. That was when she saw him. Ryan. He was standing near the far end of the bar 20 feet away, and he looked exactly like himself. That was the part that hit her hardest somehow. She had half imagined him changed, diminished, worn down by the consequences of what he had done. Instead, he looked healthy and comfortable wearing a shirt she didn't recognize, laughing at something the woman beside him had just said. The woman was beautiful, in the specific expensive way of someone who never had to be anything but beautiful. Blonde, young. The kind of polished that took real money to maintain. Ryan's hand was on her lower back. Sophia watched him lean down and say something close to her ear, something that made the woman tip her head back and laugh, and the sight of it moved through Sophia's chest like something physical. Not jealousy, she was honest enough with herself to know it wasn't jealousy. It was something more complicated than that. It was the particular grief of watching someone treat a new person with the easy tenderness they never showed you. Of realizing that the problem was never that Ryan couldn't be charming or attentive. The problem was that he had simply decided not to be those things for her. She had not been worth the effort. That thought, small, precise, devastating, sat in her chest like a splinter. She picked up her wine glass, set it back down without drinking, picked it up again, and then Ryan turned and saw her. The moment stretched. She watched it move across his face in real time, the flicker of surprise, the instant recalibration, and then, worst of all, the satisfaction. That slow, private smile that said, "Look at you. Still here. Still watching me." Like her presence in the same room was confirmation of something he had always believed, that she couldn't quite move on. That she was still orbiting him even now. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just held her gaze for one long second, let that smile settle into place, and turned back to the woman beside him. Sophia felt the heat rise into her face. She hated that it did. She hated that after everything, after the texts, after the lawyers, after 4 months of rebuilding herself from the inside out, he could still do that. Stand 20 feet away and make her feel like the lesser version of herself again. Like the woman who wasn't enough. She set her wine glass down on the bar. And that was the moment she became aware of the man standing beside her. She hadn't noticed him before, which was strange because he was not the kind of man a person typically failed to notice. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that didn't look like it had come off any rack, and he held his drink with the particular stillness of someone who never needed to fill silence with movement. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the room the same way she was, with the calm, measuring attention of someone who had learned to assess situations before entering them. He looked, she thought, like a man who was always the most dangerous person in any room he walked into, and who never needed to prove it. She didn't know why she said it. She would ask herself that question for a long time afterward, and the most honest answer she could arrive at was this: sometimes the body knows before the mind catches up. Sometimes the sheer weight of being diminished by someone who was supposed to love you reaches a breaking point, and it comes out sideways as something reckless and unplanned and entirely your own. She turned to the stranger and said quietly, "Dance with me, so my ex sees." She expected him to laugh. She expected him to look at her with that male assessment that meant he was calculating what was in it for him. Instead, he turned and looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were dark, not black, but the deep gray-green of water before a storm, and they were completely without judgment. He studied her face for exactly 3 seconds. Then he set his drink down on the bar, unhurried, and extended his hand. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to carry weight. "One dance," he said, "but make sure you're doing this for yourself, not for him." She stared at him. Nobody had said that to her in a very long time. Possibly ever. She put her hand in his. His name she didn't yet know. What she knew was the weight of his hand at the small of her back. Not possessive, not pushing, just present. A steadiness. She knew that when he guided her onto the floor, he didn't pull her toward him or take up more than his share of the space. He moved like someone who was never uncertain about where his body was in relation to other things. Easy, economical, purposeful. "You don't look like a woman who makes impulsive decisions," he said. "I'm not," she said, "usually." Usually is doing a lot of work in that sentence. She almost smiled despite herself. What gave me away? You watched the room for 20 minutes before you said a word to anyone, he said. You held your drink, but you barely touched it. And when you saw him, a small tilt of his head toward Ryan's direction, you didn't cry. You got angry, but quietly. The way people do when they've been angry for a long time, and they're very good at not showing it. Sophia missed a half step, caught herself. You were watching me, she asked. I watch everyone, he said simply. It's a habit. That's either very reassuring or very unsettling. Most things that are true are both. She looked up at him. This close, the lines of his face were more visible, early 40s she guessed, or a well-worn late 30s, with the kind of bone structure that didn't need youth to be striking. There was a scar, faint and old, along the left side of his jaw. His suit jacket had a small pin on the lapel, a crest she didn't recognize. His watch was understated and extremely expensive. You know who he is? She asked, nodded toward Ryan. No, he said. Should I? He's my ex-husband. I gathered. He cheated, she said. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this. Maybe because he had watched her for 20 minutes, and she owed him something accurate. For a long time, I think. I trusted him. I kept not seeing it because I didn't want to. And when I finally couldn't look away anymore, I left. And I thought I was past it. I thought 4 months was... I thought I was better. She paused. Then I walk in here, and he looks at me like I'm nothing, and I still feel it, she said. Like you're still defined by what someone else decided you were worth, he said. She went quiet. Yes, she said. Exactly like that. He looked at her steadily. That's not a reflection of your value. That's a reflection of his vision. That's easy to say. Most true things are easy to say. They're just hard to keep believing. They moved through the music in silence for a moment. She became aware slowly of certain things. Men at the edges of the dance floor who were watching their direction, not her specifically, but him. 2 at a table near the wall, another near the bar. Not bodyguards exactly, or rather, not obviously they were dressed like guests. They held drinks. They didn't stand at attention. But their eyes tracked the man she was dancing with the way planets track a sun. People are watching you, she said. People often do. That's not a coincidence, is it? No, he said calmly. Who are you? She asked. Before he could answer, the music shifted, and Ryan Caldwell walked onto the dance floor. She felt it before she saw it. A change in the air, the specific social pressure that comes from someone purposefully invading your space. Ryan had always been good at that, at making an entrance feel like a claim. He stepped up beside them, and his voice had the particular texture of a man who had been drinking just enough to feel bulletproof and not enough to know he wasn't. Sophia. He said her name like a period at the end of a sentence. Didn't expect to see you here. Ryan. She kept her voice level. I could say the same. You look good, he said in the tone of a man granting a compliment as if it were a favor. His eyes moved to the man she was dancing with. I don't think we've met. The man beside her had stopped moving. He stood with a stillness that was different from the stillness of a moment ago. This one had an edge to it, like silence before a sound. He said nothing. Ryan, reading the absence of deference as an invitation to fill it, pressed forward. She'd tell you about us, about how she just couldn't hold things together. Sophia's great, don't get me wrong. Great woman. Just some people aren't built for the long haul. You know what I mean. Sophia felt the words like something physical. She had heard variations of this narrative before Ryan's version, in which her marriage had failed because she was somehow insufficient, somehow not the kind of woman who could sustain a partnership. She had heard it from his mother, from 2 of his friends, and once, heartbreakingly, from her own doubt. She opened her mouth. The man beside her spoke first, quietly, without heat. She already told you everything you need to know, he said. When she left. Ryan laughed the bright dismissive laugh of a man playing to an audience that wasn't there. Is that right? And who exactly are you two? He stopped. Something had happened in the space between 1 second and the next. The two men near the wall had shifted. Not moved toward them, just shifted the way ballast shifts in water, making itself felt without making itself visible. And the man she was dancing with had tilted his head slightly and looked at Ryan, and Ryan's laugh had died in his mouth. Sophia watched it happen. Watched Ryan's face do something she had never seen it do in 3 years of marriage. Go afraid. Not surprised. Not offended. Afraid. The specific cellular fear of a man who has just understood that he has stepped into something he cannot navigate out of. Ryan started. You've interrupted something, the man beside Sophia said, still quiet, still without heat. I'd like you to not do that again. Ryan looked at Sophia. Something complicated moved through his expression, embarrassment, anger, and underneath both of them, something that looked almost like recalculation. Like he was rapidly revising some internal estimate of who she was now. He walked away without another word. Sophia stared at the space where he had been. Then she looked at the man beside her. What just happened? He made a decision, the man said. A good one for once. He was afraid of you. Yes. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Then, I told you I'd tell you my name. I'll tell you now if you want, but I should tell you once you know things become slightly more complicated. Sophia Bennett, who had spent the last 4 months rebuilding herself in the dark, who had come to this nightclub not to find anything, but simply to prove she still existed, looked at this strange, still dangerously calm man and thought, I have survived the thing I was most afraid of. I can handle complicated. Tell me, she said. Adrian Valenti, he said. The name meant nothing to her. She would learn in the hours and days that followed exactly what it should have meant. She would learn it in pieces from a careful Google search that returned almost nothing useful, but implied everything important. From the way Dana's face changed when Sophia mentioned the name the next morning, from the low, careful tone Dana used when she said, Sophia, do you have any idea who that is? From the conversation she'd have with Adrian himself 3 days later, when she asked him directly, and he answered directly because he had already decided she deserved the truth. But that night, standing on a dance floor in a nightclub, she had only entered because she needed to prove something to herself. She simply heard the name, and she watched the face of the man who carried it, and she thought, he is not what I expected, which was, she would understand later, the understatement of her life. He walked her to the bar. Not her original seat. A quieter corner away from the crowd where the noise became something you could talk through instead of shouting over. He signaled without appearing to signal, and drinks arrived without his needing to order them. She filed this detail away with the others. You're not going to tell me what you do, she said. Are you? I do several things, he said. Real estate primarily in the official sense. Import logistics. Several private equity positions. And unofficially, he looked at her. Unofficially, I solve problems for people who cannot solve them through conventional means. That's very carefully worded. I choose my words carefully. She considered this. Are you dangerous? To you, he said. No. That's not exactly what I asked. No, he said. It isn't. He let that sit. She let it sit with him. This, she noticed, was unusual. Most people filled silences, especially silences that carried weight. He did not. He seemed to inhabit silence the way other people inhabited conversation naturally without discomfort. You said a strange thing earlier, she said. On the dance floor. Before Ryan came over. I say several things. Which one? You said make sure you're doing this for yourself, not for him. She looked at her glass. Why did you say that? He was quiet for a moment. Then, because you came here tonight looking for something, and I could tell it wasn't him. You didn't look at him like a woman who wants someone back. You looked at him like a woman who wants her own story back. The one he took. The accuracy of it hit her somewhere she wasn't expecting. I was a nurse before I married him, she said. I mean, I'm still a nurse, but I was in the middle of my graduate program, nurse practitioner certification. I had 2 years left when we got married, and then—" She paused. It just kept getting pushed back. His schedule, his needs, the things that always seemed more immediately important. And then the money, the joint accounts, the settlement. There were things that happened there that I still don't fully understand. I know I got less than I should have. My lawyer told me afterward when it was already done. She hadn't told many people this, the specific details of it. She had told the bones of it cheated on divorced hard year, but not this specific thing, the program, the money, the way 2 years of her professional future had quietly evaporated while she was busy being someone's wife. Less than you should have, Adrian said. He wasn't asking. He was turning the words over. His lawyer was better than mine, she said. Or, I don't know. Maybe I was too tired to fight. Maybe I just wanted it to be over. What did he take? She shook her head. I don't know exactly. The accounting was complicated. Our finances were always he managed them. I trusted him with that too. He was very convincing about how much better he was at it than me. Something moved across Adrian's face. It was brief and controlled, but she caught it a sharpening something that looked like the professional focus of a person who has just been presented with a solvable problem and has immediately begun solving it. Did you keep any of the documentation? He asked. Some of it, not all. Keep everything you have, he said. She looked at him. Why? Because what belongs to you should come back to you, he said. That's not a gift. That's arithmetic. She stared at him. You don't know me. We've been talking for, she checked her watch, 40 minutes. 42, he said, not correcting her, just accurate. Why would you? I don't require a long history to recognize injustice, he said. And I find injustice uncomfortable to leave unaddressed. Sophia Bennett looked at Adrian Valenti across a quiet corner of a nightclub that had an hour ago been the setting of one of the worst moments of her year. And she thought about how strange life was, how you could walk through a door expecting nothing but an hour of endurance and walk out of it with something you couldn't yet name. She said, You're a very unusual man. So I've been told. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? He considered. Depends on who's deciding. Yeah. Dana found her an hour later, flushed and apologetic, already launching into explanations about the friend and the situation. She stopped when she registered who Sophia was sitting with. Not because she recognized him, she would tell Sophia later that she hadn't not at first, but because of the quality of stillness around him. The way the space around him seemed organized differently than the space around other people. I'm Dana, she said carefully. Adrian, he said. Dana looked at Sophia. Sophia gave her a small, private look that meant, I will explain everything later. Please be normal. Dana was not particularly normal for the next 20 minutes, but she managed to conceal most of it. At the end of the night, when the crowd had thinned and Dana was flagging down their car, Adrian walked Sophia to the door. I'd like to call you, he said, if you're willing. Sophia looked at him. You're probably going to tell me that your world is complicated. Very, he said, and dangerous. Occasionally. And that knowing you comes with risks I can't fully anticipate. Almost certainly, he said. She thought about the dance floor, about Ryan's face going afraid, about 42 minutes of conversation with someone who had seen her clearly and not tried to fix her or reduce her to something manageable, about what belongs to you should come back to you. Give me your phone, she said. He handed it over without a word. She typed in her number and handed it back. I'll decide for myself whether the risk is worth it, she said. He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time all evening, something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. The suggestion of warmth behind the control. Of course you will, he said. Good night, Sophia. She walked out into the cold New York air and found Dana waiting beside the car, vibrating with questions she had the restraint to hold until the door was closed. Okay, Dana said immediately the moment it closed. Who was that? I don't entirely know yet, Sophia said honestly. He was... Dana searched for words. He was like, you know when you watch those documentaries about deep-sea creatures, the ones that are incredibly beautiful, and you're also terrified of them. Sophia turned and looked at her. He was like that, Dana said. Sophia faced forward and watched the city move past the window, all light and motion and the 10,000 simultaneous lives of New York at midnight. He said something to me, she said. What? He said make sure you're doing this for yourself, not for him. She was quiet for a moment. Nobody said that to me in a very long time, maybe ever. Dana was quiet too for once. Are you going to see him again? She asked finally. Sophia thought about dark eyes in a crowded room, about a hand extended without calculation, about a man who watched everything and had watched her and had not found her lacking. Yes, she said. Because Sophia Bennett had walked into a nightclub that night to prove she still existed. She hadn't expected to walk out of it feeling like she was starting to remember who she was. But that was the thing about unexpected moments. They didn't ask permission, they just arrived and changed everything. He called the next morning at 8:47. Sophia knew because she had been awake since 6, sitting at her kitchen table with her coffee going cold beside her, telling herself she wasn't waiting for anything. She had her pharmacology notes open. She had her highlighter in her hand. She had read the same paragraph 4 times without retaining a single word of it. When her phone lit up with an unknown number, she picked it up on the second ring. You're awake, Adrian said. I have a shift at noon, she said. I'm always awake by 6. I know. You mentioned it last night. She hadn't actually. She had mentioned having a shift tomorrow. He had extrapolated the rest. She filed that away the way he listened, the way he stored small details and retrieved them accurately, and said, most people would have texted first. I'm not most people. I noticed. A pause. Not uncomfortable. He seemed constitutionally incapable of uncomfortable silences. I'd like to take you to dinner, he said. This week if you're available, Wednesday or Thursday. That's direct. I find directness saves time. She leaned back in her chair. Outside her window, the city was already running sirens in the distance, the low percussion of traffic, the particular energy of New York on a Saturday morning that never fully quieted even when most of the city was still asleep. I work Wednesday evening, she said. Thursday is possible. Thursday, he said. 7 o'clock. I'll send you the address. You don't know my address. The restaurant's address, he said. And she could hear it, that almost smile, the warmth that moved just beneath the controlled surface of his voice. Though I'd need yours eventually if I'm going to send a car. I'll drive myself, she said immediately. A beat. Of course, he said. No pushback, no negotiation. Just acceptance, clean and immediate of the boundary she had drawn. She noticed that too. She said goodbye and put the phone down and looked at her pharmacology notes and thought, this is either the most interesting thing that has happened to me in years or the most dangerous. Possibly both. She went back to studying, but she remembered the paragraph this time. Dana called at 9:15. Tell me everything, she said before Sophia had fully gotten the phone to her ear. I did some research last night after I got home, and Sophia, I need you to tell me everything right now. Good morning to you too. Adrian Valenti, Dana said. Her voice had dropped, which was unusual for Dana, who operated at a naturally elevated volume. Do you know who that is? He told me his name. He mentioned real estate and... Sophia. Dana's voice was careful in the way that voices got careful when delivering information about something irreversible. He's not a real estate developer. I mean, technically yes, on paper. There are properties. There are companies. But that's not. There are things written about him, and there are things that aren't written about him, and the things that aren't written are the ones that matter. Sophia set her coffee mug down. Tell me. He runs things, Dana said. And I don't mean like companies. I mean things, New York things, the kind of things that people in certain circles know not to ask about directly. She paused, and Sophia could hear her choosing her words carefully, which was also unusual for Dana. He's someone people are very careful around. Someone people don't cross. And last night he was sitting in that nightclub having a quiet drink, and then he danced with you and Ryan Caldwell, who is, let's be honest, not a small man in terms of ego, turned around and walked away without saying another word. Does that not tell you something? Sophia was quiet for a moment. He told me his world was complicated, she said. Complicated, Dana repeated. That's one word. He was kind to me. Sophia, I'm not naive, Dana. I know what you're trying to tell me. I know what the implication is. She picked her mug back up. I'm also telling you that he looked at me like a complete person. Not like Ryan's ex-wife. Not like a woman who needs managing. He looked at me like I was someone worth paying attention to. Do you know how long it's been since anyone did that? Silence on Dana's end. Then quietly, be careful. I'm always careful, Sophia said. No, you're always competent. That's different. Careful means... Dana stopped, started again. Just keep your eyes open, all the way open. Promise me. I promise, Sophia said. She meant it, she did. But she also thought about dark gray-green eyes, and the weight of a hand at her back, and what belongs to you should come back to you, and she thought, sometimes careful and open are the same direction. Thursday arrived with the specific energy of a decision already made. Sophia had looked up the restaurant he sent, discreet Italian, the kind of address that had no sign outside and required a reservation 3 months in advance, which meant he had either made this reservation before he called her, or he had made one phone call that moved things other people couldn't move. She suspected the latter. She wore the black dress. The good one, the one she'd bought for herself 6 months ago during the divorce proceedings, as a kind of private defiance proof that she still had a self-worth dressing well for. She had never worn it out until now. She took the subway because she had said she would drive herself, and taking the subway was close enough to the spirit of it, and because she was a New Yorker and New Yorkers took the subway. He was already there when she arrived. He stood when she walked in, not performatively, just instinctively, the reflex of someone raised to stand, when a person entered a room, and something in his expression changed when he saw her. Not dramatically. Just a small, genuine shift in the stillness, the way water changes when light hits it from a different angle. You look well, he said. You look exactly the same as Friday night, she said. I own several identical suits. She sat down. That's either very efficient or very concerning. Efficient, he said. I find decisions about appearance consume energy better spent elsewhere. That's something people say when they have enough money to make those decisions invisible. He looked at her steadily. Yes, he said. It is. She appreciated that. The absence of deflection. She had known too many men who reacted to directness with a kind of flustered social management, who redirected or softened, or turned it into a joke. Adrian simply absorbed it and gave back accuracy. They ordered. He knew the menu without looking at it, deferred to her on the wine, asked whether she had dietary restrictions, the way a person asked who actually intended to remember the answer. You called at 8:47 Saturday morning, she said. That's specific. I was awake at 6, he said. I waited. Why? Because calling someone at 6 in the morning after meeting them the night before is not respectful of their time. And 8:47 is? 8:47 is when I determined you had been awake long enough to have had coffee and moved past the first hour of your morning, which you confirmed. She stared at him. You calculated that. I assess situations, he said. It's not calculation exactly, it's attention. I pay attention to things. To everything. To things that matter to me, he said. The simplicity of it moved through her in a way she wasn't prepared for. She looked down at her water glass and took a breath. You said something Friday night, she said. About my money, about the settlement. I remember. I've been thinking about it. She looked up at him. You said what belongs to me should come back to me. I've been thinking about that all week and I need to know what you meant by it. Because if there's some kind of... I didn't mean a favor, he said quietly. I didn't mean an arrangement with conditions. I meant that you were robbed, and robbery has remedies. He paused. I have resources. People who understand financial documentation and corporate structures. If you give me what you have, the records, whatever you kept, I can have someone look at it. Determine what actually happened. And if something did happen, if there was something, then you'll have that information, he said. What you do with it is yours to decide. She studied him. Why? He met her eyes. Because I find it intolerable when people use trust as a weapon, he said. You trusted him. He used it against you. That's not a marital problem. That's a character problem. And character problems have consequences. Sophia felt the words settle somewhere deep. She had spent months trying to understand Ryan, trying to find the narrative that made sense of it, the explanation that turned it from cruelty into something more manageable. And here was Adrian Valenti, who had known her for 6 days, offering her the clearest assessment she had heard from anyone. He used your trust against you. That's not a failure on your part. That's his. You're very certain about things, she said. About some things, he said. Other things I'm very uncertain about. Like what? He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, like what I'm doing right now. She waited. I don't take women to dinner, he said. In the personal sense. It's been a long time. My world doesn't accommodate it easily. There are risks that come with proximity to me that most people don't sign up for knowingly. You're telling me this now, across the appetizers. I'm telling you this now because you deserve to know it before we go any further, he said. Not after. I don't deal in information withheld as a strategy. She looked at him for a long time, at the scar along his jaw, at the hands resting on the table, large, still capable looking, at the eyes that watched her with an attention she was still getting used to. Okay, she said. Okay, you understand, or okay, you're not concerned. Okay, I heard you, and I'm choosing to continue the dinner, she said. I told you Saturday morning I'll decide for myself whether the risk is worth it. Something moved across his face again. That shift, that warmth beneath the surface. You did say that, he said. I meant it, she said. They ate dinner. They talked for 3 hours. She told him about nursing school, about the moment she knew she wanted emergency medicine, a car accident she'd witnessed at 17. The paramedics arriving and working with that specific focused calm that she had spent her whole subsequent life trying to emulate. She told him about her mother, who had been a school teacher, and the most quietly stubborn person Sophia had ever met, who had taught her that dignity was not something other people could take from you, but you could absolutely give it away if you weren't careful. She told him about the marriage, not all of it, not the worst parts, but enough. Enough to give him the shape of it. He told her things too, slowly, carefully. Not everything she understood, that even then, that there were rooms in Adrian Valenti that might take a long time to open, if they opened at all. But some things. He told her he had grown up in Brooklyn, not the gentrified Brooklyn of now, but the Brooklyn of 30 years ago, in an apartment with walls thin enough to hear every argument the neighbors had, and a father who'd worked the docks until his back gave out. He told her that he had learned early that the world organized itself around power, and that the question was never whether to be subject to that organization, but where to position yourself within it. He told her that he had made choices that he did not regret, but that he also did not romanticize. Do you ever want out? She asked. Not carefully, just directly, the way he had modeled directness for her all evening. He considered the question seriously. Out implies there's a clean edge, he said. A door you can walk through and close behind you. My life doesn't have that kind of architecture. That sounds lonely. It has been, he said. Yes. The honesty of it stopped her. She said, You could have pretended that wasn't true. I could have, he said. I didn't want to. She drove home. She had taken a car in the end. A small surrender to practicality, and sat in the back of it watching the city go by and thought about loneliness, about how it appeared in different shapes for different people. For her, it had looked like a marriage where she felt invisible. For him, it looked like a life where everyone saw exactly the surface he chose to show them, and nobody pushed past it. She thought, "We are both people who have been not quite known." She thought, that might be the most dangerous kind of understanding. He called again the next morning, not to arrange another dinner, just to ask how her shift had gone. She stood in the hospital parking lot in her scrubs, still running on the particular electric exhaustion that came after a long emergency overnight, and told him about a kid who'd come in at 2 a.m. with an allergic reaction severe enough to stop her heart for about 4 seconds, and about how she had brought her back, and about the specific quality of relief that lived in that moment. The monitor flatline becoming a rhythm again, the room exhaling. Adrian was quiet for a moment after she described it. Then, "Do you know what I noticed about you Friday night before you spoke to me?" "What?" "You walked into that room and you didn't see a party," he said. "You saw a situation. You assessed the exits, the crowd density, the people who looked like they might need monitoring. I watched you do it in about 40 seconds, like someone who is always looking for who might need help." Sophia stopped walking. She was standing very still in the parking lot, her key card in her hand. "Most people don't see that about me," she said. "Most people aren't looking," he said. She didn't know what to do with that, so she said, "I have to sleep." "Sleep," he said. "I'll call you tonight." He did. And the night after that. And by the end of the second week, she had stopped finding it surprising and started finding it necessary, which was a different thing entirely, and one she was not quite ready to examine closely. The third week brought Ryan. She had known somewhere in the back of her mind that it was coming. Ryan Caldwell had never been comfortable being a background character in any story, and the sight of Sophia, his ex-wife, the woman he had trained himself to think of as lesser standing at ease with a man who had made him feel afraid for the first time in recent memory, was not something Ryan would absorb quietly. He texted her on a Tuesday. "Can we talk? There are some things I owe you an explanation for." She stared at the message for a long time. Then she called Adrian. "Ryan wants to meet," she said. A pause. "What did he say exactly?" She read him the text. "Don't meet him alone," Adrian said. His voice had changed, not louder, not harder exactly, but with an edge that hadn't been there a moment ago. Something focused. "Meet him somewhere public if you meet him at all. You don't want me to go." "What I want isn't relevant. This is your call." He paused. "But I'll tell you what I think if you want it." "Tell me." "He doesn't want to explain anything," Adrian said. "He wants to manage you. He saw you Friday night and realized he miscalculated. He thought you were finished and you walked in looking like someone who wasn't finished at all. Now he's trying to get ahead of something." She thought about that. She thought about the careful wording. "There are some things I owe you an explanation for," the language of someone performing contrition rather than feeling it. The language of management. "You might be right," she said. "Or I might be wrong," he said. He might have genuinely reflected on something. People occasionally do. "You don't believe that." "No," he said. "But I try not to make your decisions for you." She met Ryan for coffee on a Wednesday morning at a cafe near the hospital somewhere she knew, and he didn't. She got there first and chose the table and ordered her own drink before he arrived. Small tactical decisions that she recognized as Adrian's influence filtering into her thinking. Ryan looked good, rested, slightly careful around the eyes, the way people looked when they had prepared for a conversation in advance. He sat down across from her and ordered nothing and said, "You look great, Sophia. Seriously." "Thank you," she said. "What did you want to tell me?" He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, a reset, like he was recalibrating the approach. He had expected something different from her. The old Sophia, maybe. The one who would have softened the situation, offered an opening, made it easier for him. I heard you've been spending time with Adrian Valenti, he said. She looked at him steadily. Where did you hear that? People talk. He leaned forward. Sophia, I need you to understand who that man is. I know I'm not. I know we're not in a good place, you and me, and I know that's my fault. But I am telling you as someone who still cares about you. Ryan. That man is dangerous. Not like aggressive. I mean he is genuinely actually. Ryan, she said again, quieter this time. He stopped. Are you actually here to warn me about Adrian Valenti? Or are you here because seeing me with him made you uncomfortable and you wanted to remind me that you still have opinions about my life? His mouth closed. Because those are two different things, she said. And I'd like to know which one it is. He looked at the table. The performance of contrition shifted slightly into something that might have been genuine discomfort. Both, he said finally. Honestly, both. She had not expected that. The honesty of it surprised her into a moment of silence. At least that's real, she said. Sophia, there were things in the settlement, Ryan. She said it cleanly, without drama, the way she delivered bad news in the emergency room, direct and steady, and without flourish. Things that weren't right. I've had someone look at the documentation. His expression changed. Something went very still in him. What documentation? He said. The financial records, the divorce filing, the joint account history. She watched his face carefully. My lawyer wasn't good enough to catch it at the time, but someone with better resources caught it. Your lawyer agreed to the terms. My lawyer agreed to terms that I trusted were fair because I trusted the man I'd spent 3 years with not to steal from me, she said. I was wrong about that. About several things. Ryan's jaw tightened. Then in a voice that had dropped the warmth entirely. What do you want? I want what's mine, she said. That's it. That's all. I want what was taken from me, the money that was supposed to cover my program that I had before we were married, that I can document went in and didn't come back out. She picked up her cup. I'm not looking to destroy you. I'm not angry enough for that anymore, honestly. I just want what's mine. He stared at her for a long time. He did this, he said. Valenti. He found this. I did this, she said. He helped. There's a difference. Ryan laughed, and it was a bitter, complicated sound. You know what he is. What he actually is. You think he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. You think men like that do anything without a reason. He told me his world was complicated, she said. He told me there were risks. He was honest about those things before I had any reason to trust him, which is more than I can say for you. She stood. She picked up her bag. I'm not asking you to like this, Ryan. I'm telling you what's coming. She walked out into the cold morning air, and her hands were not quite steady, and she let them be unsteady because there was no one watching now, and she had earned a moment of not performing composure. She called Adrian from the sidewalk. He knew, she said, about the documents. The moment I mentioned it, he knew exactly what I was talking about, which means he knew what he took. Yes, Adrian said. His voice was very calm. You expected that. I expected that, he confirmed. She breathed. What happens now? Now he has a decision to make, Adrian said. He can do the right thing voluntarily, or someone can explain to him in detail why that would be in his best interest. Adrian, without violence, he said. I want to be clear about that. I have people who are very persuasive using only words and the correct information delivered to the correct people. She thought about this. His career, there are several individuals in his professional network who would be very interested in certain details about Ryan Caldwell's approach to financial management, Adrian said. Details that are entirely factual and entirely documentable. The choice of whether to publicize those details is simply one of timing. That's leverage. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly, opened them, watched a cab rush through the intersection. Is this the part where I ask you not to do anything I wouldn't do? Is that what you want to ask? She thought about Ryan's face when she mentioned the documents, the flicker of something beneath the practiced surface. Not guilt had a different texture. This had been the flat, pragmatic calculation of someone running numbers. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." "Good," he said. She started walking back toward the hospital. The city moved around her, urgent, enormous, indifferent, in the beautiful way cities were indifferent, expecting nothing, and holding everything. "He said something before I left," she said. "What?" He said you don't do anything without a reason. He implied that you have an angle, that this isn't—" She paused. "That I have an ulterior motive," Adrian said. "Yes." Silence. Long enough that she felt the edge of it. "I want you to know that's not an unfair thing for you to think about," he said finally. "I am not going to tell you it's false. I have reasons for everything I do. They're not always simple." He paused. "My reason here is that I met a woman on a Friday night who was trying to remember she existed, and I found her worth paying attention to. That's the most honest answer I have." Sophia stopped at the corner of 53rd Street. She stood there for a moment with the city roaring around her, and she thought about Dana's voice going careful on the phone. About Ryan's face going afraid on the dance floor. About 3 hours over dinner and daily phone calls, and the way Adrian Valenti listened, like she was saying things worth keeping. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said again. "I believe you." Another pause. When he spoke, his voice was different, a fraction warmer, a fraction less guarded, like a window opened the smallest amount to let in air. "Thank you," he said. She almost said, "Don't thank me yet," because she knew with the steady practical intelligence that had gotten her through nursing school and a bad marriage and 4 months of rebuilding that they were still at the beginning of something. That there were rooms in this man she hadn't entered. That there were costs she hadn't yet discovered. That Ryan was not wrong, that Adrian Valenti moved through the world with power that had a price, and that proximity to that power had a price too. She knew all of that. But she also knew what it felt like to stand in a crowded room and feel invisible. She knew what it felt like to be assessed and found insufficient by someone who was supposed to see you clearly. And she knew with a certainty she trusted that Adrian Valenti saw her. Not his version of her. Not the useful version or the manageable version or the version that fit what he needed. Just her complicated and tired and rebuilding and still alive, all of it at once. That was not a small thing. That was not a thing she was prepared to walk away from simply because it was complicated. She had done complicated before. She had done it alone. This time at least, there was someone standing beside her who had looked at the full weight of what she was carrying and not once asked her to put it down. She started walking again back toward the hospital, back toward the work she was good at, toward the life she was in the middle of reclaiming one piece at a time. And she thought, this isn't the end of anything. It was the part of the story she hadn't known was coming. The part that changes everything. Ryan sent the money back on a Friday. Not all of it. Not voluntarily. But enough a wire transfer that appeared in Sophia's account on a gray November morning, while she was between patients, enough to cover 2 full years of her graduate program, with a margin left over enough to confirm what she had already known, but needed documented, that he had taken it deliberately, not carelessly. Deliberate theft was different from careless mismanagement. It required planning. It required looking at the woman beside you and deciding her future was a resource you were entitled to redirect. She stood in the hospital break room staring at her phone screen for a long moment. Then she texted Adrian. It came through. His response was immediate. Good. She typed how. His response took slightly longer this time. I had a conversation with someone who had a conversation with Ryan about certain details in his professional history that would be very inconvenient for his current employer to learn. She stared at that for a moment. Then, you didn't hurt him. Adrian, I told you I wouldn't. Sophia. I know. I'm not questioning it. Thank you. A pause. Then, don't thank me. It was yours. I just helped it find its way back. She put her phone in her pocket and went back to her patients. But something had shifted inside her, some internal weight she had been carrying so long, she had stopped noticing it, lightened by a degree she could feel but couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the money. It was the proof. The confirmation that she had not been paranoid, not been dramatic, not been the difficult, ungrateful woman Ryan had spent 3 years quietly convincing her she was. She had been right. She had been wronged. And now she had the evidence of both. That evening she called her mother. Her mother, Margaret Bennett, who had taught 5th grade for 31 years and raised Sophia alone after her father left when Sophia was 9, who had never once in Sophia's memory complained about the weight of that, who had simply gotten up every morning and done what needed doing with the quiet ferocity of a woman who understood that dignity was a practice, not a condition. "The money came back," Sophia said. A silence. Then, all of it. Enough, the important part. "Sophia." Her mother's voice did something complicated. "How? I had help." What kind of help? She had not yet told her mother about Adrian. She had been holding it in the careful, private way she held things that weren't yet fully formed, not hiding it, just not ready to speak it aloud in a way that made it fully real. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the moment a thing moves from private to true. "There's someone," she said. Her mother was quiet for a long time, long enough that Sophia thought the call might have dropped. "Tell me," her mother said finally. So Sophia told her. Not everything, not the specifics of what Adrian was, not the details that would require too much context to explain cleanly, but the shape of it. The nightclub, the dance, the dinner, the phone calls, the way he listened, the way he looked at her. When she finished, her mother said, "He sounds like a man with a complicated life." "He is," Sophia said. "And you're not afraid of complicated. I'm a trauma nurse mom. Complicated is my baseline." "Complicated in a person is different from complicated in a medical case," her mother said. "In a medical case, the complications are outside you. In a person, they get inside." Sophia thought about that, about the truth of it, the specific intimacy of another person's complexity, how it didn't stay at a professional distance but moved into, you changed the way you thought and what you noticed and what you found yourself willing to do. "I know," she said. "I'm being careful." "Are you happy?" her mother asked, simply, directly, the way Margaret Bennett asked everything. Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I'm starting to be," she said. "That's the most honest answer." "Then keep your eyes open and your feet under you," her mother said. "And call me more." "I will." "And Sophia." A pause. "You were never what he said you were. I hope you know that." She closed her eyes. "I'm starting to," she said. 2 days later, Adrian asked if she wanted to come to his apartment. Not in a way that required reading between lines. Directly the way he did everything. "I'd like to cook for you," he said, "if you're willing. There are things I want to show you about who I am that restaurants don't allow for." She said yes. The address he sent was on the Upper West Side, a building with a doorman who greeted her by name before she'd given it, which meant Adrian had told him she was coming, which meant he had been certain enough of her arrival to prepare for it, which said something about the way his mind worked. She took note of the detail and filed it with the others. His apartment was the first thing that genuinely surprised her. Not in size, she had expected it to be large, and it was. Not in the view floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the park, the city spread below them like a living thing. Those details fit the version of Adrian Valenti she had been assembling from pieces. What surprised her was the rest of it. Books, real ones, not decorative, the kind with broken spines and margins full of handwriting. A chess set mid-game on the coffee table one side clearly losing. A kitchen that looked genuinely used with the particular comfortable disorder of a space where someone actually cooked a pot on the stove, ingredients on the counter, the smell of garlic and something herbed and slow-cooked moving through the air. "You actually cook," she said. "I told you." "I thought that was a figure of speech." "I don't use figures of speech when I mean the literal thing," he said. He was at the stove in a dark sweater, and she had never seen him in anything but suits, and the difference was she filed it away. The slight normalcy of it. The human ordinariness of a man with his sleeves pushed up stirring something. "What are you making?" she asked. "Braised short ribs. My grandmother's recipe, more or less. She was from Naples. She believed there were two solutions to most of life's problems: good food and directness about what you wanted. I've found she was usually right." Sophia sat at the counter and watched him move through the kitchen with the same economy of motion he brought to everything else. Efficient, purposeful, nothing wasted. "Tell me about her," she said. He looked up briefly. "Why?" "Because you mentioned her voluntarily. That's rare for you." He was quiet for a moment, something that could have been a smile moving at the corner of his mouth. "She came to this country with $40 and a dress," he said. "She cleaned houses in Brooklyn for 15 years. She never complained about it. She didn't believe complaining changed anything. She believed doing changed things. She was the first person who taught me that power was something you built, not something you were given." "She sounds formidable." She was. She used to say— He paused, adjusted the heat under the pot. "That the people who look down on you while you're building are the first ones to want to stand next to you when you're done. So build. Don't argue. Just build." Sophia looked at him, at the careful control of his expression, which she had learned to read not fully, never fully, but enough to know when something mattered. This mattered. "You loved her," she said. "Yes," he said, simply. "She was the first person who saw what I was and thought it was worth something." The vulnerability of that sentence sat in the air between them for a moment. She thought, there it is. The room he's been holding closed. Not the business, not the power structure, not the carefully managed professional surface. This. The boy who had built everything from nothing and had one person in the world who saw him clearly. "I know what that's like," she said quietly. "Having one person who really sees you." He looked at her across the kitchen. "Yes," he said. "I think you do." They ate at a table by the window with the city below them, and the food was extraordinary. Not in the restaurant way, not in the performed cuisine way, but in the way of something made with actual care, something that tasted like it had history in it. She told him so, and he received the compliment without deflecting it, which was something she noticed. He neither rejected praise nor inflated it. He just acknowledged it and moved on. After dinner, she picked up one of the books from the coffee table. Dostoevsky, heavily annotated in handwriting she recognized as his small, angular, precise. "You're a reader," she said. "When I have time. Less now than I used to." "What did you want to be?" she asked. "Before." He looked at her steadily. "Before what?" "Before all of this, when you were young. What did you think you'd do?" Something moved through his expression, a door opening slightly, then measured. "A lawyer," he said. "For about 3 years when I was 15, 16. I thought that's how you changed things through law, systems, processes. What changed your mind?" "I watched a system protect the wrong people for long enough," he said. "And I decided that if the system was broken, there were other ways to arrive at the same destination." "Justice," she said. "Outcomes," he said. "Justice is an ideal. Outcomes are real." She thought about this. Is that how you justify the things that are harder to justify? He looked at her steadily. Not offended, not defensive, evaluating her question seriously. "Sometimes," he said. "And sometimes I don't justify them. Sometimes things are what they are, and I live with that, and I don't dress it in language that makes it easier to carry." It was the most honest thing he had said to her. The most unguarded. And she felt the weight of it, the actual complexity of this man, not the surface danger of his reputation, but the real internal cost of the life he had built and continued to choose. She said, "Do you want to change it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Parts of it," he said finally. "The parts that were always transitional. The businesses are more legitimate than they were 5 years ago. They'll be more legitimate 5 years from now. It's not a switch you flip. It's a direction you turn in and then keep walking. And the other parts? The parts that aren't transitional. I protect people, he said. Specific people. People who don't have other options. That part I don't want to change. She set the book down, looked at him directly. Are you telling me who you are, so I'll understand you better, or so I'll decide to leave before this gets harder? He met her eyes. I'm telling you who I am, because you deserve to know it. What you do with it is yours. She held his gaze. Thought about 4 months of rebuilding. Thought about her mother's voice. Keep your eyes open and your feet under you. Thought about Ryan's money arriving in her account. Her money hers returned by a man who asked for nothing in return except the right to be honest with her. She stood up from the table and walked around it. She stopped in front of him. He went very still. I've spent 3 years being careful about the wrong things, she said. Being careful not to want too much, not to ask too clearly, not to take up too much space. She looked at him steadily. I don't want to do that anymore. She kissed him. He was still for 1 second genuinely surprised, she thought, which meant she had crossed into a room he had not been expecting her to enter, which was interesting information about a man who seemed to anticipate everything, and then he kissed her back with the same quality of attention he brought to everything else. Complete. Focused. Entirely present. When they pulled apart, he said nothing for a moment, just looked at her. Then, that was brave. That was easy, she said. The brave part is everything that comes after. What came after was 3 weeks of a happiness so quiet and specific that Sophia barely trusted it. Not dramatic happiness. Not the performed joy of early romance. Not the dizzy chemical haze she vaguely remembered from being 22 and falling for someone for the first time. This was something different. Something steadier. Adrian Valenti brought coffee on Tuesday mornings when she had early shifts and was somehow always gone before her alarm went off. He remembered small things, a book she mentioned, a song she said she hadn't heard in years, the exact way she took her tea. He asked questions and waited for the actual answers. He called when he said he would and didn't when he said he wouldn't, and the consistency of it was so different from everything she had trained herself to expect that it took her actual effort to stop bracing for the withdrawal. He had drivers and security that moved around him in the careful choreography of people who had learned their job well. She noticed them, accepted them, asked about them once, and received a direct answer. People in my position have enemies. The security is for them, not for me. I've been doing this long enough that I'm not particularly afraid. Should I be? She asked. Proximity to me has risks, he said. I've said that before. I don't want to minimize it. What kinds of risks? He was quiet, choosing his words. People who want to get to me occasionally think about the people I care about, he said. It hasn't happened in a long time. My reputation generally makes it an unattractive strategy. Generally, he said. She filed that in the place where she kept honest, difficult things and continued. She was 3 weeks into happiness when Marcus Reeves arrived. She didn't know his name at first. She knew him as a man in a good suit who appeared beside her on the sidewalk outside the hospital on a Wednesday evening as she was walking to the parking garage. He matched her pace without being invited to. Something in her training registered threat before her conscious mind caught up, and she kept walking, kept her pace even, and said without looking at him, "Whatever you're about to say it fast or I'll start screaming." He said, "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to give you information." About what? About Adrian Valenti. She stopped, looked at him. He was mid-40s, black, with the bearing of someone who had spent time in a structured organization, military or federal, she guessed. His suit was good, but not spectacular. His shoes were practical. "Who are you?" she said. "Marcus Reeves," he said. "I'm with the FBI." She looked at him for a long moment. The city moved around them, indifferent. "Show me a badge," she said. He showed her. She looked at it long enough to actually read it. Then she looked at him. "What do you want?" "To talk," he said. "Somewhere private, somewhere of your choosing." He held up one hand. You can call whoever you want after. You can walk away right now. I'm not asking you to do anything except listen." She thought about Adrian's voice. People who want to get to me occasionally think about the people I care about. She thought, this is what that looks like. She thought my eyes are open, my feet are under me. 10 minutes, she said. There's a coffee place on the corner. We sit where I can see the door. She texted Adrian from the bathroom. Before she sat down, FBI agent named Marcus Reeves just approached me outside the hospital. Meeting him for 10 minutes. I'm fine. His response came in 45 seconds. Don't confirm or deny anything about me. Listen only. I'm sending someone to the block. She typed, I know how to handle this. His response, I know you do. The person outside is for me, not for you. She sat across from Marcus Reeves and put her phone face down on the table and said, You have 8 minutes left. Talk. He talked. He told her that Adrian Valenti had been a person of significant federal interest for over a decade. That several investigations had come close and pulled back. That Adrian operated in the space between legitimate business and organized activity with a sophistication that made clean prosecution difficult. That the people he protected were real and the outcomes he produced were often just, and that none of this changed the fundamental nature of what he was. I'm not telling you he's a bad person, Reeves said. I'm telling you he's a person who exists in a system that eventually requires a reckoning, and people who are close to him when that reckoning comes have their own problems. She looked at him steadily. Are you building a case against him right now? I'm always building a case, Reeves said. Do you have one? A pause. Not yet. Then what you're actually telling me, she said slowly, is that you don't have enough to move on him, and you're hoping I might become a source of information. Something moved across his face. I'm telling you to protect yourself. By giving you information about a man I care about, she said. That would be how I protect myself according to you. Ms. Bennett, I'm a nurse, she said. I've watched people try to manage situations for their own benefit while using the language of other people's welfare as the justification for it. I'm very good at recognizing that pattern. He looked at her for a long moment. You're not what I expected, he said. Nobody ever is, she said. She stood up, left her coffee untouched. If Adrian Valenti has done things that warrant prosecution, she said, then that process will happen through proper channels with proper evidence. If you develop that evidence, I imagine you'll use it. She picked up her bag. But I am not a resource for your investigation, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't approach me outside my workplace again. She walked out. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the concentrated effort of control from the adrenaline of having held her ground under pressure, and now having nowhere to direct the chemical aftermath of it. She walked half a block, stopped, breathed. Her phone rang. Adrian. Are you all right? He said immediately. I'm fine, she said. He wanted information about you. I told him I wasn't a source. A silence that felt different from his usual silences. Sophia, before you say anything, she said, I want to be clear. I didn't do that for you. I did it because I make my own decisions about what I am and am not willing to do, and I'm not willing to be used as a tool in someone else's agenda, not Ryan's, not an FBI agent's. She stopped. Is there something I need to know? Is there something you haven't told me that I should know before? Yes, he said. She stopped walking. There are things I haven't told you, he said. Not because I intended to hide them, because I was waiting until I was certain you were ready for the full weight of it, and also until I was certain enough of us to believe the information wouldn't simply be something used against either of us. Tell me now, she said. Not on the phone, he said. Come tonight, please. The please was new. She noted it carefully. I'll be there at 8, she said. She walked into his apartment that evening, and he was standing at the window looking out over the park, and he didn't turn around immediately when she came in, which was unusual, he always knew. The moment she arrived always turned or spoke or acknowledged it. This time he stood for a long second, looking out. Then he turned. His face was different. Not softer exactly. More exposed. The controlled surface still present, but thinner like a fabric worn fine from use. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand," she said. He nodded once, accepted that. 11 years ago, he said, I made a choice that organized everything that came after it. I had just lost someone, a man who was like an older brother to me, who was killed because someone in our organization gave information to a competing family. He was 29. He had a daughter who was 3. He paused. I found out who gave the information, and I made sure that person was held accountable. She was very still. I've never directly harmed someone who didn't represent a direct and active threat to people I was responsible for protecting, he said. That is a line I drew for myself a long time ago, and I have not crossed it. But I have been responsible for decisions that resulted in harm. I have ordered things that I cannot make neat or easy or something other than what they were. She said nothing. I have also spent 11 years building something that works differently, he said. That protects differently. The man who made those early decisions is not gone, but he is not the only thing I am. He looked at her steadily. I'm telling you this because you are not someone I am willing to manage with partial truths. And because if Marcus Reeves came to you, he will come again. And I want you to understand fully what it is you're making a decision about. Sophia stood in the middle of his apartment and felt the full weight of what he was giving her. Not a confession. Exactly. Not a performance of guilt, but the thing that was harder than both of those, a complete accounting. The actual truth of a complicated person, offered without softening. She thought about her mother. In a person, complications get inside. She thought, yes, they do. She said, the man who was killed, the one who was like a brother. Yes. Did the person responsible face justice through any other channel? Was there a legal option? A long silence. No, he said finally. There wasn't. And the daughter, the one who was 3. Something moved through his face. Her name is Elena, he said quietly. She's 14 now. She lives in Connecticut with her mother. Her education is funded. Her future is funded, anonymously, through a trust. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. You've been carrying her, she said. Yes. For 11 years. Yes. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him. She took his hand in both of hers and felt the stillness of him, the entire controlled, contained, carefully managed stillness of Adrian Valenti fracture just slightly at the edges. I'm not naive about what you are, she said. I never have been. I knew what Dana was trying to tell me. I knew what Reeves was implying today. I am choosing with my eyes fully open to be here. She looked up at him. But I need you to understand something in return. Tell me, he said. I am not a project, she said. I am not a woman you saved from a bad marriage. I am not something you can direct or decide for. I am someone you are in this with equally honestly, without either of us being more than we are. I know, he said. Do you? His hand tightened on hers very slightly. You are the first person in a very long time, he said, who has asked me to account for myself rather than simply accept me at a distance. That is not comfortable, but it is the most real thing that has happened to me in years. She looked at him. She thought about a nightclub 3 weeks ago, about whispered words to a stranger, about one dance that was supposed to make an ex-husband jealous and had instead turned into this complicated, serious, fully weighted thing she hadn't planned for. She thought I walked in there looking for a moment of control. I walked out of it into something completely uncontrolled. She thought, good. Okay, she said. We keep going. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles briefly simply, and in the gesture was more vulnerability than she had seen from him in everything that came before all the conversation and honesty and careful self-revelation of the last 3 weeks. "Okay," he said. Outside the city continued doing what cities did, enormous and indifferent and full of 10,000 simultaneous stories, none of them simple, all of them ongoing. And inside that apartment above the park, two people who had each spent a long time being known only partially stood in the specific serious light of being known fully. It was terrifying. It was the most alive either of them had felt in years, and neither of them let go. Part 3. Lưu ý, viết 5.000 đến 5.500 từ, liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng, hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi, không mô tả cảnh tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đặt điểm 10 trên 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh sửa lời AI, kể theo ngôi thứ 3 tăng độ kịch tính không viết lân man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mực document mới, 2 đến 3 phút, cần có mini climax và đạt 10 đến 15. Mini climax mỗi phần cứ 10 đến 12 phút. Có một twist lớn sâu sắc đan xen, mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn, tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8 đến 10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh cho tôi. Show more. Part 4. Justice without losing herself. The morning after Adrian told her the truth about himself, Sophia woke up at 5:43 and lay in the dark of her own apartment and did what she always did when something required serious thinking. She ran through it the way she ran through a complex case, methodically, without flinching from the parts that were hard. What she knew, Adrian Valenti had made choices that had caused harm. He had also spent over a decade building something different on top of those choices quietly, without seeking credit for it. He had been honest with her when honesty cost him something. He had returned what was hers without using it as leverage. He had told her about Marcus Reeves before she could wonder why he hadn't. What she didn't know how deep it went, what the full accounting looked like. Whether the FBI agent who had appeared outside her hospital was a warning or a beginning. What she felt clear, more clear than she had expected. She got up, made coffee, stood at her kitchen window, and watched the city come alive in the gray November light, and thought about her mother's words. Keep your eyes open and your feet under you. And thought, yes, both. That was exactly the balance. Not blind trust, not fear-driven distance. Eyes open, feet solid. Moving forward anyway. She called Adrian at 7:15. He picked up immediately, which meant he had been awake, which meant he had been doing the same thing she was doing, waiting. "I'm still here," she said. Before he could say anything, before he could recalibrate or manage or carefully phrase his first words of the morning. "I wanted you to know that first." A pause. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "Thank you." "I have questions," she said. "I know. Not today. Today I have a double shift and a certification exam section due Friday, but soon." "Whenever you're ready," he said. "And Adrian," she paused. "The FBI thing. Reeves coming to me? Does that worry you?" A careful silence. "It tells me someone gave him information about you. Someone in a position to know who I spend time with." "That's not reassuring." "No," he said. "It isn't." "Do you know who—" "I have a suspicion," he said. "I'm working on confirming it." She absorbed that. "Is this going to become a problem?" "It already is one," he said honestly. "The question is how large it becomes." She drank her coffee, breathed. "Okay," she said. "Handle what you need to handle, and keep me informed. You want to be kept informed. I'm not a woman who does well with managed ignorance," she said. "You know that by now." "Yes," he said, "I do." She hung up and went to work, and the 12 hours that followed were the particular brutal grace of emergency medicine. 3 trauma cases before noon. A pediatric allergic reaction that required everything. She had a family in the waiting room. She sat with for 20 minutes because the attending was occupied and someone needed to be the steady voice in the room. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. The specific combination of technical precision and human presence that emergency nursing required, it was the thing that fit her most naturally, the work that felt most entirely like herself. At 9 that night, exhausted and still in her scrubs, she sat in the break room eating a sandwich that had gone slightly stale and opened her graduate program portal for the first time in 4 days. The money Ryan had returned had changed something practical. She had spoken to the program coordinator that week, tentatively carefully, about the possibility of resuming her enrollment for the spring semester. The coordinator had been encouraging. The coursework she'd completed before withdrawing would transfer. She would need to reapply formally, but her academic record was strong, and the gap was documented. Spring semester. 4 months away. She stared at the portal for a long time. At the course listings, the requirements, the carefully mapped-out path toward the credential she had been working toward when Ryan had quietly, deliberately dismantled the financial foundation of it. She thought, he took this from me. And I am taking it back, not because of Adrian, not because of the money returned. Because of her, the choice she had made to sit across from Ryan in a coffee shop and state cleanly what she wanted and why she deserved it. The choice she had made every morning for 4 months to get up and work toward the life she wanted, even when that life felt very far away. She filled out the preliminary inquiry form. Hit submit. Then she finished her sandwich and went back to work. The confirmation she had been waiting for came not from Adrian, but from Ryan, and it came in a way she hadn't anticipated. He called her on a Thursday evening, not texted. Called, which meant whatever he wanted to say, he couldn't afford to have in writing. She almost didn't pick up. Then she did, because Sophia Bennett had learned that avoiding things rarely made them smaller. "Sophia," he said. His voice had the careful texture of a man who had rehearsed his opening. "Ryan," she said, "what do you want?" "A beat. I want to warn you about something. I know you don't. I know we're not in a position where you trust my motives. I know that. But I'm telling you this because regardless of everything else, I don't want something bad to happen to you." She waited. "There's a man named Victor Caruso," Ryan said. "He's been asking about you, asking people who know me, mutual contacts, people from the firm. He wasn't asking about me. He was specifically asking about you, when you work, where you live, who you spend time with." Sophia went very still. "What does Victor Caruso have to do with anything?" she said. "He's connected to Valenti," Ryan said. "Or rather, he's connected to people who are opposed to Valenti. There's some kind of, I don't know the details, Sophia. I genuinely don't, but I know that this man has been asking questions about you, and I know that people who ask those kinds of questions, in those kinds of circles, are not doing it out of curiosity." She was very quiet. Her apartment felt suddenly different, not unsafe exactly, but altered. The space between what she had been and what she was becoming suddenly visible. "How do you know this?" she said. "Because one of my contacts told me," he said. "Because I still know people who know people. Because whatever has happened between us, Sophia, He stopped. Started again, differently. "You trusted me. I used that. I know what I did, and I can't undo it. But I can tell you this, so I'm telling you." She thought about what Adrian had said, a suspicion I'm working on confirming. She thought about Reeves approaching her outside the hospital. She thought about the specific, careful choreography of Adrian's security that moved around him, and that she had accepted as background detail without understanding all of what it was for. She said, "Why would someone connected to Valenti's opponents be asking about me?" "Because you're close to him," Ryan said quietly. "And people who want leverage over someone like Valenti look for the things he cares about." She felt the sentence land with the particular weight of something she had already known, but not yet stated directly to herself. She was a target now. Not because of who she was, because of who she was to Adrian. "Thank you for telling me," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Sophia, we're done, Ryan," she said. Not angrily, just factually. "But thank you for this." She hung up and immediately called Adrian. He answered before the first ring finished. "I was about to call you," he said. "Victor Caruso," she said. A silence that told her everything about how much he already knew. "How did you hear that name?" he said. "Ryan called me." She sat down on her couch. "He said Caruso has been asking about me, my schedule, my address, my habits." "Yes," Adrian said. His voice had changed, not louder, not harder in a dramatic sense, but focused in the way of a man who has just moved from a state of managing a situation to a state of addressing it. "Who is he?" she said. "Someone I did business with 7 years ago. Someone I stopped doing business with 4 years ago when I discovered he had been running operations that I don't permit within my network." A pause. He has been rebuilding his position. He has been methodical about it. And apparently, he has decided that the clearest path to disrupting me is through you. "Why me specifically?" "Because you're the first person in a long time that I've been visible about," he said. "I don't do that. I don't—" He paused, and she heard in the pause something that cost him. "I don't let people get close. It hasn't been safe to. For them. And I was careful about that for a long time." "Until me," she said. "Until you." She sat with that. With the weight of what it meant that her proximity to Adrian was both the thing that had returned what was stolen from her and the thing that had made her a target. That loving a man like this meant becoming part of the map of his vulnerabilities, whether she intended to or not. She said, "What are you going to do about Caruso?" "I'm going to handle it," he said. "That's not specific enough." "Sophia, I told you, I don't do well with managed ignorance." Her voice was steady. "I am not going to panic. I am not going to demand you dismantle your life for my comfort. But I am going to know what I'm in the middle of. That's not negotiable." A long pause. Then, "Caruso has been building leverage against me for 2 years. The people asking about you are his people. He's trying to find something he can use either to pressure me into a concession or to create a situation that destabilizes my operations." He paused. "He won't hurt you. That would escalate things in a direction that is not in his interest. He wants information or he wants the appearance of a threat." "The appearance of a threat is still a threat," she said. "Yes," he said. "I know." "So handle it," she said. "But tell me when it's handled." "It will be handled by the end of the week," he said. "How?" "Caruso has business interests that are vulnerable to scrutiny from people above my level," he said. "Federal agencies, not Reeves' different division, different jurisdiction. People who have been waiting for a reason to look more carefully at his import operations." A pause. "I have documentation. I've had it for 2 years. I was waiting for the right moment to use it." "And I'm the right moment," she said. "You are the moment I stop waiting," he said. She closed her eyes, opened them. "Adrian," she said, "I need to ask you something and I need you to answer it completely honestly." "Yes." "Are you handling Caruso because he's a threat to me, or because he's been a problem you needed to address and I'm the catalyst?" A pause that told her he was taking the question seriously. "Both," he said. "Honestly, both. He's been a problem I should have addressed sooner, and you are the reason I'm addressing it now." He paused. "I'm not going to separate those things to make the answer cleaner. That's the truth." She breathed. "Okay," she said. "That I can work with." The week that followed was the week Sophia understood something fundamental about what it meant to be in Adrian Valenti's world, not as a visitor, not as someone he was managing and protecting from a careful distance, but as someone genuinely inside it. It meant that the doorman in her building started knowing her name without being told. It meant that she noticed the same car parked on her block 2 mornings in a row. and recognized without panic that it was Adrian's people. It meant that Dana called her on a Tuesday evening and said in a voice that was trying very hard to be casual, "So I've been doing more research and I need to know that you're okay." And Sophia said, "I'm okay, Dana. I promise." And Dana said, "You sound different." And Sophia said, "I am different." And the silence that followed was the silence of a friendship absorbing a change it hadn't quite caught up to yet. It meant that when Sophia walked into the hospital every morning, she was aware in a way she hadn't been before of who else was in the room. Not fearfully, just aware. The particular heightened attention of someone who understood that the world they were moving through had a texture they hadn't previously registered. It meant all of this. And it also meant somehow the opposite. It meant that on a Wednesday night, she came home from a brutal shift to find Adrian in her apartment. He had a key now given deliberately and received carefully sitting at her kitchen table, with a book open beside him and actual groceries in her refrigerator, because she had told him once that she never had food after a long shift, and he had simply addressed that without announcement or fanfare. "You didn't have to do this," she said, dropping her bag at the door. "I know," he said. "You're not going to say something about wanting to or about taking care of me." "No," he said. "I'm going to say you look exhausted and dinner will be ready in 20 minutes and you should sit down." She sat down. She put her elbows on the table and her face in her hands for a moment, not crying, just allowing herself to be tired in front of someone, which was its own kind of intimacy. She had been performing competence for so long in so many rooms for so many people. Not performing it here felt like setting down something very heavy. He put a glass of water in front of her without being asked. She picked it up and drank. "Caruso," she said. Not a question. "Managed," he said, from the kitchen, still cooking. "Tell me." "The documentation went to the right people yesterday morning," he said. "By yesterday afternoon, there were federal agents at his primary import facility in New Jersey. By this morning, his lawyers were in meetings." He paused to do something at the stove. "He is no longer in a position to be thinking about leverage against anyone. He is thinking about himself." She absorbed this. Just like that. "Not just like that," he said. 2 years of waiting and the right moment. "And Reeves, the FBI agent. Different case, different division," Adrian said. "Reeves is not going away. He will keep looking. I want you to understand that. My situation doesn't resolve cleanly." "I know," she said. "You said you're comfortable with complicated." "I said I can handle complicated," she corrected. "Comfortable is a different word." He came around the counter and looked at her. She looked up at him. There was something in his face that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago, or rather something that had been there all along, but that she was only now able to read clearly, a concern that wasn't about danger or strategy or management. Just concern. For her, the simple human kind. "Are you all right?" he said. "Yes," she said. "I'm tired and I have approximately 1,100 things on my mind and my program reapplication is due Friday and someone has been watching my building and you are standing in my kitchen making dinner. So, yes, I'm all right." He looked at her for a moment. Then he went back to the kitchen. "Your reapplication," he said. "Walk me through where you are with it." And she did. Over dinner, which was pasta simple and perfect, she walked him through the application. The coursework transfer questions, the personal statement she was rewriting, the recommendation letter she needed from a supervising physician who had written one before and would write one again. He listened with the full attention she had come to depend on, asked specific questions, suggested she separate 2 points in her personal statement that were trying to do the work of one. Practical. Present. Useful. "You know a lot about graduate applications for someone who went the opposite direction," she said. "I read," he said. "You read academic application guidelines for fun." "I read everything," he said. "And no, not for fun, because I've funded several graduate students over the years, and understanding the process helps me understand what they need." She put her fork down, looked at him. "How many?" she said. "Students. People you've helped. Quietly. Like Elena. Like Mo. Sophia." "I'm not criticizing," she said. "I'm asking." He was quiet for a moment. Then, enough, he said. Over the years, enough. Why don't you talk about it? Because it isn't about talking, he said. It's about doing. My grandmother didn't talk about the problems she solved them and moved on. She watched him. She thought about the public image of Adrian Valenti, feared powerful, the kind of man that Ryan Caldwell's face went gray at the mention of. And about this reality. A man who funded students he would never meet, and carried a 3-year-old's future in a trust for 11 years, and learned academic application guidelines so he could understand what the people he helped actually needed. You're more complicated than even you present yourself as, she said. Most people are, he said. Not this complicated. He looked at her steadily. Is that a problem? She thought about it honestly. The way she always thought about honest things all the way through, not stopping at the comfortable conclusion. No, she said. But it means I can't afford to be simple either. You were never simple, he said. That's why I'm here. Yay. The week Ryan came back was the week Sophia understood that some people never truly leave. They circle. They wait. They come back when they calculate the angle has changed. She saw him outside the coffee shop where they had met before. Not an accident, she registered that immediately. He was standing across the street, which meant he had timed this, which meant he had been watching for her schedule, which was its own kind of information. She crossed to him. What do you want, Ryan? He looked at her with the expression of a man who had prepared something and was now uncertain whether to use it. I wanted to see how you were, he said. I'm fine, she said. That's not why you're here. He looked at her for a long moment. Something complicated moved through his expression, not the old arrogance, not the careful management of their post-divorce interactions. Something more genuine than either of those. I want to make this right, he said. Properly, not just the money. I want to Sophia, I made a serious mistake, multiple mistakes, and I've been thinking about what I did and I don't. He stopped. I'm asking for a chance to explain. She looked at him. She had known Ryan Caldwell for 4 years. Loved him in the way you loved someone before you fully understood who they were. Believed in him. Rebuilt herself after him. And she knew, standing there with the full clarity of a woman who had done the internal work, she knew this was real. He was genuinely contrite. Genuinely in pain. The years of confident management had finally cracked open into something more honest. And it didn't change anything. Not because she was still angry. She had moved past angry months ago. Not because she was performing closure. But because the road back to something was not just about the other person being sorry. It was about what you actually wanted, and she knew with perfect certainty what she wanted. It was not this. I believe you mean that, she said. I do. I believe something shifted for you, and that you're telling me something real. He looked at her with the particular hope of a man who has just heard an opening. But Ryan, she said, steady and kind. I spent years waiting for someone to choose me, to see me, to decide I was worth the full effort. She paused. I finally learned that I can do that for myself. I don't need someone to come back and offer what they should have given me all along. He stared at her. This isn't anger, she said. I want you to know that. I'm not punishing you. I'm just done. Genuinely done. In the way that means I've moved somewhere you're not. Something in his face cracked. Not dramatically, he wasn't a man who did drama well. Just a quiet fracture, the expression of someone receiving a sentence they had known was coming, but had held out hope against. Valenti, he said quietly. It's because of him. It's because of me, she said. He showed me things, yes. But what I learned about myself. The woman standing here, she was always here. I just forgot she existed for a while. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Then, he's dangerous, Sophia. I know I don't have the right to say this anymore, but I'm saying it. I know he is, she said. I've chosen it anyway. That's what choosing looks like. She left him standing on the sidewalk. She did not look back. Not because she was trying to make a point, but because she genuinely didn't need to. There was nothing behind her worth turning toward. She called Adrian from the corner. "Ryan found me," she said. "I know," he said. "Are you all right?" "Better than all right," she said. I said what I needed to say, to him and to myself. She paused. "I want you to know something. Tell me, whatever I am now, wherever I've gotten to in the last 2 months, that's mine, not yours. You didn't create it." She stopped at the corner, let a cab rush past. "But you made it possible to get here faster, by seeing me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. I want you to know I understand the difference." A silence. The kind he used when words would be insufficient to what he was feeling. Then very quietly, "Sophia." "Yes, I'm in love with you," he said. "I've been trying to find the right time to say that. I don't think there's a right time. I think this is the time." She stood on the corner of 53rd Street in the November cold, with the city screaming around her in every direction, and she felt the sentence move through her, like something physical, warm, certain, undeniable. "I know," she said. "Oh, that's all," he said, and she heard a thread of actual nervousness in his voice. The voice of the most powerful man she'd ever met, undone by 3 words. "No," she said. "That's not all." She breathed. "I'm in love with you too. I've been fighting it because I thought that was the careful thing to do. And then I realized being careful was never the point. Being present was, being real." She heard him exhale, a single quiet breath that carried the weight of a man setting something down. "Come home," he said. "Who's home?" she asked. A pause. Then, "Ours," he said. "Whichever one that means tonight." She hailed a cab, got in, gave his address to the driver, and watched the city move past the windows, enormous and alive and relentless in the best possible sense. She had walked into a nightclub 2 months ago to prove she existed. She had found instead that she had been existing all along. She had simply needed someone to look, and then more importantly, to look for herself. The cab moved uptown through the November dark. Sophia Bennett, 30 years old emergency nurse graduate student, returning woman who had been emptied out and refilled with something more entirely her own, sat in the back of a cab and felt for the first time in years like the protagonist of her own life. Not rescued, not rebuilt by someone else's hands. Just home. In the truest sense of the word, the self she had always been finally arrived at. Everything after this would still be complicated. She knew that. She held it clearly. Reeves would keep looking. Adrian's world would keep being what it was. There would be costs and risks and moments where the weight of his life pressed against the edges of hers. She would handle it. Because she knew now that she could handle things. That she had always been able to. She had simply forgotten to trust herself with that knowledge. The cab stopped. She paid. She got out. And she walked forward. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. Sophia was in the middle of a 12-hour shift when her phone buzzed in her scrub's pocket, and she almost didn't check it. There were 3 patients in active triage and a family in Bay 4 that needed a Spanish interpreter, and the kind of controlled chaos that made emergency medicine what it was. But she checked it in the 30 seconds between Bay 2 and the nurses' station, and she stopped walking when she saw the subject line Mount Sinai Graduate Nursing Program, Spring Enrollment Confirmation. She stood in the middle of the corridor and read it twice. Then she put her phone back in her pocket and went back to her patients because that was what you did. You felt the thing fully and you kept moving. And she didn't tell anyone until her break at 6:15 when she called Adrian. He picked up on the first ring. "The program accepted me," she said. "Spring semester, full enrollment." The silence on his end lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then, "I know." She stopped. "What do you mean you know?" "I mean I've been waiting for you to check your phone since 9 o'clock this morning," he said. "The confirmation went through the university system at 8:52. I may have been watching for it." "How would you possibly—" "I have a relationship with the registrar's office," he said. Administrative, not academic. I didn't interfere with anything. I simply knew when the system updated. She stood in the break room with her cold coffee and the particular noise of a hospital at 6 in the evening filtering through the walls and felt something that was a complicated mix of amusement and something deeper, the specific warmth of being seen by someone who was paying attention, not because they were required to, but because they genuinely cared about the outcome. "You were waiting for me to find out," she said. "Yes." "That's either very sweet or very controlling." "Efficient," he said. "I was prepared to celebrate immediately." She laughed. A real one, the kind that arrived without permission, that came from somewhere genuine rather than performed. She hadn't laughed like that in a long time before Adrian, and now she did it regularly enough that she'd stopped noticing how much she had missed it. "We'll celebrate tonight," she said. "Yes," he said. "We will." She finished her shift and took the subway to his apartment, and he had champagne open and food on the table. And she sat across from him and felt the full weight of the moment, spring semester, her program, the credential she had been working toward when her marriage had quietly dismantled itself around her dreams. 2 years of lost time, 4 months of rebuilding, 2 months of finding something she hadn't been looking for at all. "To finishing what you started," Adrian said and raised his glass. She raised hers. "And to what you start when you think you're just surviving," she said. He looked at her steadily. "That too," he said. What she hadn't calculated, what she would understand only in retrospect, was that the night of her acceptance letter was the last quiet night for a long time. Marcus Reeves came back 4 days later. Not outside the hospital this time. He called her directly, which meant he had her number, which meant he had either found it through channels she didn't want to think about too carefully, or someone had given it to him. She stared at his name on her screen for 3 rings before answering. "Ms. Bennett," he said. "Agent Reeves," she said. "I told you I wasn't interested in a conversation." "The last time we spoke, yes," he said. "Things have changed. For you, maybe. For you too," he said, "whether you know it yet or not." A pause. "I'm not calling to recruit you. I want to be clear about that. I'm calling because you're in a situation that is accelerating, and I think you deserve to have information rather than discover it the hard way." She sat down. "What information?" "Victor Caruso," Reeves said. Her stomach tightened. "Caruso was handled. Adrian, Caruso's operations were disrupted," Reeves said. "That's true. What Valenti either didn't tell you or didn't know himself is that Caruso wasn't working alone. He has a partner who has been very quiet and very patient, and who is not connected to any of the documentation that went to the federal agencies last week." She said nothing. "This partner," Reeves continued, "has been building a case of his own, not against Valenti, against you." The silence that followed lasted long enough that she heard her own breathing. "Against me," she said. "Specifically a legal action. Civil, not criminal. The argument being that your relationship with Valenti makes you complicit in certain financial structures he operates. It's a creative interpretation of conspiracy statutes, and it probably wouldn't stick, but that's not the point. The point is that it creates public exposure. Your name attached to his name in a formal legal context. Your employer receiving documentation. Your graduate program receiving a flag." She felt the floor of the situation shift under her. "That's the threat," she said. "Not physical, reputational." "Career-ending reputational," Reeves said. "For a nurse practitioner candidate, having your name formally associated with organized crime in a legal document, even a civil one that gets dismissed, is not a recoverable situation in most institutional contexts." She stood up, walked to the window, forced herself to breathe normally. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because Valenti will handle it his way," Reeves said, "which may or may not protect you completely, and which will definitely create additional exposure for both of you. There is another way." "You want me to cooperate with your investigation," she said flatly. "I want you to consider that there are paths through this that don't require choosing between the man and your career," he said. "That's all I'm saying." And those paths coincidentally involve giving you information about Adrian. A pause. They involve a conversation, a protected conversation, immunity for anything discussed. She looked out the window at the city and felt very clearly in that moment the full architecture of the position she was in, the thing Ryan had tried to warn her about, the thing Adrian had been honest about, the cost that came with proximity to a man like Adrian Valenti, not in the dramatic sense of physical danger, but in this specific surgical sense, the way his world could reach into hers and dismantle the things she had built. "I need to think," she said. "I understand," Reeves said. "Think fast. The filing window is short." She hung up. And for 60 full seconds, she stood at that window and did not call Adrian. Not because she was considering Reeves's offer, she wasn't, not seriously, not in any way that felt like a real option. But because she needed 60 seconds to feel the weight of this without anyone watching her feel it, to be afraid privately and then decide what to do with the fear. 60 seconds. Then she called Adrian.
Chamasai.
He arrived at her apartment in under 20 minutes, which meant he had been close or had moved very fast, and she didn't ask which. He came through the door with the particular focused stillness of a man who has received bad news and has already begun moving through it rather than toward it. She told him everything Reeves had said. All of it. Precisely in the order it was delivered without editing for his comfort. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, "Who is Caruso's partner?" Reeves didn't say a name. "He knows the name," Adrian said. "He's protecting it." "Why would he protect it?" "Because the partner is potentially more useful to him than Caruso was," Adrian said. His voice was controlled, but she knew him well enough now to hear the edge beneath the control. Not anger exactly. Something more precise than anger. The focused calculation of a man whose professional mind had just identified a problem and was moving rapidly through possible solutions. Because if Caruso's partner is the kind of person I think it is, Reeves is playing a longer game. Using both of you. Both of us, she repeated. Using the threat against you to pressure me, he said. And using the threat against me to pressure you. Two separate mechanisms pointing at the same outcome. She looked at him. Who do you think the partner is? He was very still for a moment. The kind of still that meant the answer cost something. There's a man named Daniel Park, he said. He and Caruso have history I wasn't fully aware of. Park is a civil attorney. Very good one. He has been adjacent to my operations for 3 years without ever being directly involved. I considered him a neutral party. He wasn't neutral, she said. Apparently not, he said. And in his voice was the specific tone of a man who has made an error and is being honest about it rather than managing it. She sat down on the couch. He remained standing. She watched him think, or rather watch the surface of a man thinking the small micro-expressions that moved through his face when he was processing something complex. Adrian, she said. He looked at her. This is my career, she said. My program. Everything I've been rebuilding. If my name appears in a legal document associated with organized crime, even if it gets thrown out, even if it's baseless. She stopped. The hospital. The program. I would lose them. I know, he said. That's not acceptable to me. I know that too. So tell me how you fix it, she said. Not generally. Specifically. He sat down. Across from her, not beside her, maintaining the professional distance of someone in a working mode rather than a personal one. She had seen him do this before this particular shift. It wasn't coldness, it was focus. The same focus she applied in a trauma bay when a situation required precision over emotion. Park filed the civil action through a shell entity, he said. One that is registered in a jurisdiction that makes it difficult to trace quickly. But difficult is not impossible. He paused. I need 48 hours. To do what? To identify every financial thread connecting Park to that entity, and to Caruso, and to make that documentation available to the people who will find it most useful. He paused. Not Reeves. Different people. You have people in federal agencies, she said, not a question. I have relationships, he said carefully, built over years, people who have found my information accurate and reliable in the past. You've been doing this a long time, she said. Yes. Trading information. Providing accurate information to correct parties at correct moments, he said. Yes. She looked at him steadily. And Park. What happens to Park? If the documentation I develop shows what I believe it will show, Adrian said, Park will be facing a disbarment proceeding within 60 days. A civil attorney who has been building fraudulent legal entities for organized crime is not a difficult prosecution once the paper trail is visible. And my name? The filing will be withdrawn before it becomes public, he said. I'll make sure of that. How? Because Park will understand that proceeding with the filing is significantly worse for him than withdrawing it, he said. She held his gaze. You're going to threaten him. I'm going to present him with accurate information about his own situation and allow him to make a rational decision, Adrian said. Whether that feels like a threat depends on whether he's been honest about his own exposure. She breathed, looked at her hands for a moment, looked back up. Adrian, she said, I need to ask you something hard. Ask it? Is what's happening to me now, this targeting, the civil action Reeves, using me as leverage, is this the permanent condition of being with you? She held his eyes. Is this what my life looks like going forward? Someone always looking for an angle, always finding the thing I've built and identifying it as a pressure point. The silence that followed was the longest he had held in her presence. Long enough that she could hear the city outside, the muffled traffic and sirens that were the constant background music of New York, the sound of everything continuing while this particular moment held still. There are periods of stability, he said finally. I won't lie to you and say this is the permanent condition. It isn't. But I also won't tell you it will never happen again, because that would be dishonest, and I don't deal in dishonesty with you. She nodded slowly. Good, she said. I needed the honest answer. Does the honest answer change something for you? She thought about it, genuinely. The way she had thought about everything in this relationship all the way through without stopping at the comfortable conclusion. No, she said. Because the alternative is a life without risk. And I've lived that life. I was in it for 3 years with a man who looked completely safe and turned out to be the thing that actually damaged me. She paused. At least with you, I know what I'm choosing. Something in Adrian's face shifted, that specific shift, the warmth beneath the control, the window cracking open. He reached across and took her hand, not urgently, just firmly. The grip of someone who has heard something important and wants to mark that they heard it. 48 hours, he said. Trust me for 48 hours. I trust you for longer than that, she said. But yes, 48 hours. He worked. She didn't fully see it. That was the nature of his world, that the most significant things happened at distances she couldn't observe directly, but she felt the reverberations of it. On the first evening, 2 men she recognized from his security came to her building and spoke with the doorman. On the second morning, her department head at the hospital received a call from Hospital Legal that she heard about secondhand. Something about a document that had been submitted and then immediately withdrawn, a clerical error. Nothing that required follow-up. By the second afternoon, her phone showed a missed call from a number she didn't recognize, and when she called it back, it was a paralegal at a law firm she'd never heard of, informing her that a civil inquiry bearing her name had been formally retracted. She sat at the nurse's station and read the follow-up email twice. Then she called Adrian. It's done, she said. Yes, he said. Park withdrew it. Park is currently meeting with his own attorney about separate matters, Adrian said. He will be occupied for some time. And Caruso's partner exposure is no longer abstract, he said. Reeves will have what he needs by end of week, though I suspect he already has a reasonable idea of what's there. She closed her eyes briefly, opened them. Reeves is going to keep coming after you, she said. Yes, he said. That hasn't changed. But not through me. No, he said. And in his voice was something that sounded like a decision rather than a promise. Something operational, settled, put in place. Not through you. Not again. You can't guarantee that. I can make it significantly unattractive to try, he said. She sat at the nurse's station with the controlled noise of the ER around her and thought about 48 hours. About a man who had said, "Trust me," and then delivered exactly what he said he would, precisely and without drama, and without requiring her to witness or participate in the mechanism of it. She had been kept informed. She had been kept in the decision. And she had been protected not in the way of someone being managed, but in the way of someone who was genuinely valued. There was a difference. She knew the difference now in her bones. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "What happens to us in the long run?" she said. "I mean that seriously. I'm in a graduate program. I'll be a nurse practitioner in 2 years. I have a career in a field that has very clear professional conduct requirements. You have..." She gestured vaguely at the air, at the invisible architecture of his world. "All of this. How does that work?" "Long term." "I've been thinking about that," he said. "Tell me what you've been thinking." "My legitimate operations are growing," he said. "The real estate portfolio, the private equity positions. Within 3 years, they can stand entirely independently. A pause. The other aspects of my work are becoming less central. I've been transitioning deliberately." "Because of me," she said. "Because of a direction I was already moving," he said. "You accelerated it. You gave me a reason to move faster." "I don't want to be someone's reason to change," she said carefully. "I've been that before. Being someone's reason for something is a precarious place to be." "That's not what I mean," he said immediately. "I was changing because I chose to change. Because I've spent years building something that I want to become legitimate, and the timeline I had in my head was indefinite, and you..." He paused. "You made the timeline feel urgent, because you're someone I can see a future with, and I want that future to be possible." The honesty of it moved through her, slowly warming things she hadn't known were still cold. "A future," she said. "Yes," he said. "What does that look like to you, specifically?" "You finishing your program," he said. "You working the way you work, fully, completely. Not managed by me, not defined by me. Yourself entirely." He paused. "Me being someone who is in your life in a way that adds to it, rather than complicating it." "It already complicates it," she said. "Less so," he said, "with time." "You can't promise that." "No," he said. "I'm promising the direction, not the speed." She thought about her mother again. About keep your feet under you. Her feet were under her. She had kept them there through everything. The divorce, the rebuilding, the FBI agent, the civil threat, 48 hours of holding still, while a man she loved worked through something she couldn't see. Her feet had held. "Okay," she said. "Okay what?" he said. "Okay, I believe you about the direction," she said. "The direction is enough. I don't need the guarantee. I need the honesty and the direction." "You have both," he said. "I know," she said. Her mother came to visit in December. Sophia had known this moment was coming with the particular anticipatory tension of someone who loves 2 people and is aware that those people will now occupy the same room and that the outcome of that occupancy matters. Margaret Bennett was not a woman who was easily impressed or easily managed. She was 61 years old, a retired teacher with reading glasses, and an unfailing ability to detect performance in students and people in life. She had raised Sophia alone, and she had done it well, and she had strong opinions about the men who came in and out of her daughter's life, which was to say, she had had one strong opinion about Ryan Caldwell delivered after their 3rd meeting, in a sentence so precise it had taken Sophia 3 years to fully understand it. "He loves the idea of you more than he loves you." She wondered what Margaret Bennett would say about Adrian Valenti. The dinner was at Sophia's apartment. She cooked roasted chicken, her mother's recipe, the kind of meal that was a statement of normalcy and care. Adrian arrived exactly on time, which she had expected. With wine she hadn't asked him to bring, and a book for her mother. She definitely hadn't mentioned a history of post-war Italian immigration in New York. That was Sophia would later discover precisely the subject Margaret had been researching for a personal writing project. She didn't ask how he knew. She was past asking how he knew things. Her mother shook his hand and looked at him in the direct assessing way she had looked at every parent-teacher conference, and every student who thought they could coast, and every man Sophia had ever introduced her to. "Mr. Valenti," she said. "Mrs. Bennett," he said. "Thank you for coming." "I came for Sophia," her mother said pleasantly. "But I'm glad you're here." Sophia watched this exchange from the kitchen doorway and thought, "Oh, this is going to be interesting." It was. Over dinner, her mother asked Adrian questions with the cheerful directness of a woman who had spent 31 years asking children to explain their reasoning. She asked about his work, the real estate, the legitimate version which he discussed precisely and without inflation. She asked about his background, and he told her about Brooklyn and the docks and his grandmother from Naples, and her mother's expression shifted subtly, the shift of a woman recognizing a story she understood. She asked about his plans, and he said simply and without elaboration that his plans were to continue building legitimate businesses and to be someone Sophia could be proud to be with, and the directness of it stopped her mother mid-bite. She looked at him for a long moment. "My daughter," Margaret Bennett said, setting down her fork, "spent 3 years making herself smaller for a man who never noticed she'd done it. Do you understand what I mean by that?" "Yes," Adrian said. "Do you have any intention of doing the same thing?" "No," he said. "How can I believe that?" He considered the question seriously. "You probably can't," he said. "Not yet. Trust is built from evidence over time. I can tell you my intention. I can't ask you to believe it on the basis of an intention alone." Margaret Bennett looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her fork again. "Good answer," she said. Sophia, who had been holding her breath across the table, released it so quietly that she hoped no one heard. After dinner, when Adrian went to get his coat, her mother appeared beside her at the sink and said in a low voice, "He's going to cost you something." "I know," Sophia said. "It won't be small. I know that too." Her mother was quiet for a moment, looked toward the hallway where Adrian was, then back at Sophia. "He looks at you the way a man looks at something he's decided to protect," she said. "Not own. Protect. There's a difference." "I know the difference," Sophia said. "Yes," her mother said. "I think you do now." She touched Sophia's face briefly, one of the rare physical gestures that Margaret Bennett allowed herself, the quick, decisive touch that meant more than words. "Then keep going." 3 weeks before Christmas, Sophia received a call from her hospital's chief nursing officer. Not about anything ominous about a recommendation for a departmental leadership position that would begin the following spring, timed alongside her program enrollment. A role she had applied for before her marriage, before all of it, and had been too depleted to follow through on. She called her mother first, then Dana, then Adrian. "The CNO called," she said. "About the department lead position." "I know," he said. She stopped. "How do you know?" "Because you applied for it 18 months ago," he said. "And because Dr. Eleanor Marsh, who sits on the departmental review committee, is someone I know slightly. She mentioned your name 3 weeks ago in a conversation." "You didn't." "I said nothing," he said immediately. "I listened. I didn't advocate, I didn't intervene. I listened, and I came home, and I thought she's going to get this because she is exactly what they need, and she applied for it over a year ago before anyone interfered with her trajectory." He paused. "I was waiting for you to find out." She stood in the hospital parking lot in the December cold, with her breath misting in the air, and felt full. the specific weighted fullness of a life that had been stripped bare and was now restoring itself piece by piece through work and time and the hard, patient labor of choosing every day to keep going. "This is mine," she said. Not to him, not quite. To herself. Out loud, because some things needed to be said out loud to become completely real. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." She thought about the woman who had walked into a nightclub to prove she still existed. About the desperate, tired, quietly furious woman who had grabbed a stranger's arm and said, "Dance with me so my ex sees." That woman had been real. She had been Sophia genuinely in a moment of genuine desperation. But she was not the whole of Sophia. She was the low point of a person who was much larger than her worst moment. "Adrian," she said. "Yes, I want you to know something," she breathed. The version of me that came home after the divorce, the one who was barely getting through her shifts, who was eating cold takeout over textbooks at midnight, who walked into that nightclub because she needed to feel like she existed. She paused. "I would have gotten here anyway. I want you to know that." "I know," he said. "Do you?" "Yes," he said. "You were always going to get here. I just a pause. I happened to be there that night. And I'm glad I was." "Me too," she said. "Take the position," he said. "Take the program. Take everything that's yours." "I intend to," she said. She ended the call and stood in the parking lot for a moment longer. The December air was sharp and clean. The city was everywhere around her, loud, relentless, full of the 10,000 simultaneous urgencies that made New York what it was, this overwhelming living thing that demanded everything from you and gave back something that felt on days like this like exactly enough. She had started the year in pieces. She was ending it whole. Not because someone had put her back together. Because she had done it herself day by day, choice by choice, with the tools available to her and the clarity she had built from the ground up. And the love of a complicated, dangerous, deeply honest man who had never once asked her to be smaller than she was. She went back inside. She had patience waiting. She had work to do. She walked through those doors the way she always had, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing and why it mattered. And for the first time in a very long time, it wasn't performance. It was simply true. January came in cold and without apology. Sophia started her graduate program on a Thursday morning, sitting in a seminar room with 11 other working nurses, all of them balancing careers and ambition, and the particular exhaustion of people who had chosen one of the hardest professions, and then decided to go deeper into it. The professor was a small woman in her 60s, who opened the first class by saying, "You are here because someone believed you were worth the seat. Make sure that someone was right." She looked around the room when she said it. When her eyes reached Sophia, Sophia held the gaze steadily. She thought, "I believe I'm worth the seat. Finally, after everything." She texted Adrian after class, first day done. His response. "How was it?" she typed. "Like being myself again. Fully." His response came after a pause that felt deliberate. "That's everything." She put her phone in her bag and walked out into the January cold and felt the semester opening in front of her like a road she had been standing at the beginning of, for a very long time blocked, then cleared. Now finally actually hers to walk. Dana met her for lunch and said the moment she sat down, "You look different." "Different how?" "Like you arrived somewhere," Dana said. "Like you stopped being in transit." Sophia thought about that. "That's exactly what it feels like," she said. "Like I finally got somewhere I was trying to get to for a long time." "Is that the program or is that him?" Dana asked. "Both," Sophia said. "Separately. They're not the same thing." Dana looked at her for a long moment. "You know what I never told you about the night you met him?" "What?" "When I found you at that table, when I walked over and you were sitting there with this man I didn't recognize, you looked like yourself again for the first time since the divorce. Not because of him. You looked present, like someone had turned a light back on." She picked up her coffee. "I was terrified of who he was. I did all that research. I lost sleep. But I also thought whatever this is, she's back. Sophia looked at her. You never told me that. I was too busy being scared for you to say the nice part, Dana said. Sophia laughed. Fair enough. Are you scared? Dana asked. Of him, of his world, of any of it? Yes, Sophia said honestly. Sometimes. In specific moments when the reality of what he is becomes very concrete. She paused. But I'm not scared of him. There's a difference. A big one, Dana agreed. The biggest, Sophia said. February brought the first real test of what they were becoming. It came not from Caruso or Park or Reeves or any of the external pressures she had already navigated. It came from inside, from the specific domestic friction of two people who had each lived alone for a long time and had strong opinions about how life should be organized. They had been spending 4 or 5 nights a week together, alternating between her apartment and his, and it had worked well enough that the question of something more permanent had begun hovering at the edges of conversations without quite landing in them. Adrian had mentioned once that his apartment had 2 spare bedrooms, and that one of them would make a good study. She had mentioned once that her lease was up in April. Neither of them had pushed the implicit logic. Then one night she came home from a brutal overnight shift and found that his housekeeper had reorganized her study materials, the books and notes, and printed research articles she kept in a specific, internally logical chaos that other people consistently misread as disorder. Everything had been neatly stacked. The system she used to track her reading progress was gone. She stood in the doorway of the study and felt something white and immediate move through her. She called him. He was in a meeting. His assistant picked up, said he'd call back in 20 minutes. She waited. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the neatly organized disaster of her study and breathed through the particular anger of someone who had spent years having her systems overridden by a man who believed he knew better. He called back in 18 minutes. The housekeeper reorganized my notes, she said before he had finished saying hello. A pause. I'll speak with her. I don't want you to speak with her, Sophia said. I want you to understand why this is a problem. Because it's not about the notes. It's about... She stopped, forced herself to be precise rather than emotional. When Ryan managed things, he always had a reason. An efficiency argument, a logic. He was always helping. And every time he helped, something of mine got absorbed into his version of things. She paused. I can't do that again. I won't. Silence on his end. Long enough that she felt the edge of it. You think I'm doing what he did, he said. I think the mechanism could become the same thing, she said. Even with completely different intentions. What do you need from me? He said. She breathed. I need you to tell your housekeeper that my study is not to be touched, ever, under any circumstances. Done, he said immediately. And I need you to understand that when I say I want something a certain way, I mean it. I'm not negotiating. I'm not being difficult. I'm telling you what I need. I understand, he said. Do you? Because you're used to managing things. You're extraordinarily good at it. But I am not a thing to be managed. Sophia. His voice was quiet, careful, the voice he used when something mattered enough to slow down for. I know that. I have never thought of you as something to manage. Then remember it, she said, especially when your instinct is to fix things. A pause. My instinct is always to fix things. I know, she said. That's what I'm asking you to watch. He was quiet. Then, you're right. I'll speak with the housekeeper, and it won't happen again, and I'll watch my instincts more carefully. Thank you, she said. Are you all right? He said. I'm tired and I'm angry, and I'll be fine in an hour, she said. I just needed to say it. Say it whenever you need to, he said. That's not a burden. That's what this is supposed to be. She let out a long breath. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She fixed her notes herself. rebuilt the system exactly as it had been. And when she was done, she sat at the desk and thought, that was a hard conversation. We had it, and it didn't break anything. That is what a real thing looks like. March came with a phone call from Elena's mother. Sophia found out about it afterward. Adrian told her himself the same evening it happened, because he had committed to keeping her informed, and he kept his commitments. Elena's mother, whose name was Christine, had somehow found out that the funding for Elena's education was connected to Adrian, had called him, had said simply, I want her to know, when she's old enough. I want her to know someone has been taking care of her. He had said he would think about it. He told Sophia this over dinner, and she could see in his face how much it cost him the particular weight of a man carrying something for so long that setting it down felt more frightening than keeping it. What do you want to do? She said. I don't know, he said. And the honesty of not knowing from a man who always knew who made certainty his profession was its own kind of revelation. Tell me what you're afraid of, she said. He looked at her. That she'll ask me questions I can't answer the way a girl deserves them answered, he said. About her father, about what happened, about why someone she doesn't know has been paying for her life. Those are hard questions, Sophia said. Yes. Can you answer them honestly? In ways appropriate for a 14-year-old, he said. I think so, but it requires her to know things about what I am, what her father's world was. Maybe that's not your decision, Sophia said. He looked at her. Christine is her mother, Sophia said. She called you. She asked about Elena knowing. That means she's already decided her daughter can handle some version of the truth. Your job isn't to protect Elena from the reality that her father was in a dangerous world. Your job is just to be honest about the part that's yours. He was quiet for a long time. I was responsible for the safety of her father's network, he said. I didn't do enough. You've been making up for it for 11 years. That's not the same as doing enough. No, she said. It isn't, but it's what you have. She reached across and put her hand over his. Adrian, you are not the man you were 11 years ago. You've built 11 years of different choices on top of that. A 14-year-old girl doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs to know someone saw her father as worth something and saw her as worth something. He looked down at her hand on his, then back up at her. When did you get this good at this? He said. I work in emergency medicine, she said. People come to me at their worst moments. I've been learning how to be useful in hard conversations for a long time. He turned his hand over and held hers. I'm going to call Christine back, he said. And say yes. I think that's right, she said. Will you? He stopped. What? Will you be there? He said. When I meet her. Elena, eventually. Will you come with me? She looked at him. At this man who could make entire organizations afraid, and who was asking her to come with him to meet a 14-year-old girl because he needed the steadiness of her presence. Yes, she said. Of course. His grip on her hand tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. April was the month everything accelerated. Sophia's department lead position became official. She sent her mother a text that said simply, "It's mine." Her mother sent back 3 words, "I know. Go." She began her second semester coursework simultaneously managing the dual demands with the specific organized intensity of a woman who had learned finally that she was capable of more than she had been told. Adrian's legitimate operations completed a restructuring that his attorney described in a call Sophia was present for as the most comprehensive transition from mixed entity operations to clean corporate structure I have seen in 20 years of practice. He said it with the careful neutrality of a lawyer who does not ask certain questions. Adrian thanked him without inflection. After the attorney left, Sophia looked at Adrian across his kitchen table and said, "That sounded significant." "It is," he said. 3 years of work completed. "And the rest of it," she said. "The parts that don't have a clean corporate structure yet. Managed by people I trust, moving in the same direction, he said. More slowly, but moving. Because of me, she said. She had asked this before. She was asking it differently now, not with the old fear of being someone's reason, but with the clear-eyed curiosity of someone who wanted to understand her own place in the story accurately. Because I'm 40 years old, he said, and I've been building something for 20 years, and I want to see where it goes when it's entirely mine, legitimately, without the other architecture. He paused. You accelerated it. You reminded me that time moves whether I use it or not. That's almost poetic, she said. Don't tell anyone, he said. I have a reputation. She laughed. He watched her laugh with the particular expression she had learned to read as him being completely unguarded, the expression he only let himself have when he was certain no one else was watching, and she was the only room in his world where that was true. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression changed, not dramatically, but in the specific way it changed when something required his full professional attention. I need to take this, he said. Go, she said. He walked out of the kitchen. She sat at his table and heard the low, controlled register of his voice from the hallway. Not the words, just the tone. The tone of someone delivering instructions with the calm authority of a man who was completely in command of his own landscape. She thought, I love him. Not as a new thought, she had known it for months, but with the particular fullness of a thought that has stopped needing to be defended. It simply was. Solid. Settled. Undeniably true. He came back in 7 minutes. Sat back down. Problem, she said. Managed, he said. You're going to tell me what it was. Later tonight, he said. Nothing that changes anything. Just something that needed a decision. Okay, she said. She believed him. That was new too, the belief that arrived without having to be constructed, that lived in her naturally, now the result of months of being told the truth and finding it accurate. Sophia, he said. Yes, he looked at her steadily. The table between them, the quiet apartment, the city going about its enormous business outside. I want to ask you something, he said. And I want you to know that whatever your answer is, it changes nothing about what we are. She felt something shift in the air. Not alarm, something else. The specific atmospheric change of an important moment arriving. Ask me, she said. He reached into his jacket pocket, set something on the table between them. A ring, simple, precise, a single diamond in a clean platinum setting that looked exactly like something chosen by someone who understood her aesthetic entirely, which meant he had been paying the kind of attention that this required for a long time. I'm not doing this in a restaurant, he said. I'm not doing it in a nightclub or with an audience or in any way that performs the thing rather than actually saying it. He looked at her. I'm doing it here at this table where we've had more real conversations than I've had in the last decade combined. She looked at the ring, looked at him. I know what I am, he said. I know what my life costs. I know that loving me is not the uncomplicated thing that you deserved the first time someone asked you this question. I know there will be more moments like the last few months, more things to navigate, more costs I can't fully predict. He paused. I also know that you are the clearest, most fully present person I have ever known, that you actually see me in a way that nobody has in my entire adult life, and I know that whoever I am still becoming, I want to be that person next to you. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. Not from sentiment, from the specific, overwhelming experience of being known completely and chosen anyway. You said it would change nothing, she said, whatever my answer is. Yes, he said. Then I want you to know that it changes everything, she said. Because yes, changes everything. He went very still. Yes, she said again, clearly, completely. Adrian Valenti, who is the most complicated man I have ever known, and who has never once asked me to be smaller than I am. Yes. He picked up the ring. She held out her hand steady, completely steady, the hand of a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ground up, and knew the value of what she was holding on to. He put the ring on. It fit exactly. Of course it did. He had measured that too somehow. Of course he had. She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that was very close to crying, and she let it be both because she was done choosing between feelings that wanted to exist simultaneously. He said, "You're laughing." "Because you measured my ring size somehow without telling me," she said. "Your jewelry box," he said. "There's a ring on the left side that you never wear. I used that." "That's extremely calculating." "Yes," he said. "I love you," she said. "I know," he said. "Say it back," she said. "I love you," he said. And the three words in his voice, with the quality of stillness he brought to everything that mattered, landed with the weight of everything he had shown her, rather than just said the coffee at 6 in the morning, the grocery runs after long shifts, the 48 hours, the honest answers, the housekeeper, the ring, Elena's trust fund, 11 years of carrying something quietly, all of it contained in 3 words, delivered with the complete absence of performance. She believed every syllable. 6 months later, Sophia presented her first capstone research project to the graduate nursing faculty, a study on emergency department triage optimization for cardiac events in adults over 55, drawn from 3 years of her own clinical observation and the specific pattern recognition she had developed over a decade of emergency work. She stood at the front of the room in her own voice, with her own data defending her own conclusions. The faculty panel asked hard questions. She answered them precisely, and without flinching. When she walked out, Adrian was in the corridor. She stopped. "You're here." "You didn't tell me not to be," he said. "I didn't tell you the time." "Your program coordinator has a newsletter," he said. She stared at him. "You subscribed to my graduate program's newsletter." "I wanted to know when things happened," he said simply. She walked to him and put her forehead against his shoulder briefly, in the way she had developed. Not helplessness, just the specific gesture of a person resting in the presence of someone they trusted completely. "How was it?" he said. "Perfect," she said. "It was exactly what I wanted it to be." "Good," he said. She lifted her head. "The nursing board exam is in 3 months." "I know the date," he said. "Of course you do," she said. They walked out into the October afternoon. The city was doing what it always did, unrelenting, magnificent, indifferent, in the way that made it the best possible backdrop for a life, because a city that demanded everything from you also gave you the permission to be everything back. She thought about the woman who had walked into a nightclub a year ago and whispered, "Dance with me so my ex sees to a stranger." She thought about how afraid that woman had been. Not of the nightclub, not of Ryan, not even of being seen, but of herself. Of wanting too much. Of taking up too much space. Of asking for the full version of the life she deserved. She had asked for it anyway, accidentally, desperately, in a moment of pure, unplanned self-assertion that had turned into the most important decision of her year. Sometimes the thing you whisper in desperation is the truest thing you've ever said. "What are you thinking?" Adrian said. "About that first night," she said. "About how terrified I was. About how I grabbed your arm and said the most humiliating thing, and you," she looked at him, "you just extended your hand." "You weren't humiliated," he said. "You were brave." "I was desperate." "Sometimes those are the same thing," he said. She thought about that. About the specific bravery of desperation, the way that hitting a wall and pushing through it anyway was not lesser courage than the planned kind. About a nightclub and a stranger and a dance, and everything that had come after the money and the FBI, and Victor Caruso, and her mother's quick hand on her face, and Elena's trust fund, and a ring in a jewelry box measured without her knowing, and 48 hours of trusting a man completely, and a spring semester, and a department lead position, and a capstone presentation in a room where she was the most qualified person to speak. All of it from that one moment, one desperate whisper to a stranger. She said, "Thank you for extending your hand." He looked at her. "You would have found your way regardless." "Maybe," she said, "but I found it faster with you." "We found it faster," he said. "Together." She took his hand. They walked. 1 year to the day after Sophia Bennett had walked into that nightclub wearing an old blue dress and cheap wine and the particular invisible armor of a woman trying to survive her own life, she walked into the same nightclub wearing the kind of confidence that is not purchased or borrowed but built cell by cell from the inside out. The room was the same. The music was the same. The crowd was the same mix of New York wealth and ambition, and the various human dramas that played out in expensive rooms every Friday night. But she was not the same woman. Adrian was beside her. He had suggested this, and she had said yes, because returning to the place where something started was its own kind of statement proof that you had traveled far enough to come back without flinching. They stood at the bar, the same corner, the same approximate spot, and he handed her a drink and said, "You remember what you said to me?" "Dance with me so my ex sees," she said. Word for word. "And what did I say?" "You said make sure you're doing it for yourself." She looked at him. "I didn't understand that then. I thought it was a strange thing to say to someone you'd just met." "Did you understand it later?" "Eventually," she said, "about 3 months in. When I realized that everything I was doing, the program, the position, the fight with Ryan, all of it I was doing for me. Not for you, not against Ryan, for myself." She paused. "You said it before I needed to hear it, which meant I had to go live it before I could understand it." "That's usually how it works," he said. "Infuriatingly yes," she said. He took her hand, led her to the dance floor, the same floor where it had started, where Ryan had walked over with his drunk arrogance and his easy cruelty, and where Adrian had stepped between them and said she already told you everything you need to know, and where a woman who thought she was invisible had started becoming visible again. They danced. Not desperately, not as performance, not for any audience. Just because it was where they had started, and it was right to come back to it. He said, "You know what I thought that first night when you said it?" "What?" "I thought this woman is in pain, but she is not broken," he said. "She is fighting. She doesn't know it yet, but she is already fighting." She looked up at him. "You could see that." "I could see everything," he said. "I told you, I watch everyone." "You watch everyone," she said. "But you only danced with me." "Yes," he said. "Why?" He looked at her steadily, with the full, unguarded attention of a man who had stopped managing his own expression the way he managed everything else, who had let the discipline of his face relax in her presence, because she was the one room where he didn't need it. "Because you were real," he said. "In a room full of performances, you were the only person in actual pain who was also choosing to stay upright. I found that a pause. I found it the most interesting thing I'd seen in years." "Interesting," she said. "Essential," he said. "Eventually. That first night interesting. Now essential." She thought about Dana saying you looked present, and her mother saying he looks at you like something he's decided to protect, not own, and her own voice in a hospital parking lot saying, "This is mine," and Adrian's voice on the phone saying ours, whichever one that means tonight, and a ring on the left side of a jewelry box, and 48 hours, and a 14-year-old girl in Connecticut whose future was funded quietly by a man who never asked for credit. She thought about Ryan's face going afraid on a dance floor, about how much had depended on that moment, not because Ryan mattered to what came after, but because his fear had been the first proof that she was standing next to someone powerful enough to change the shape of her circumstances. And then, the second proof, that that power had been put in service of her, not control of her. She thought about her mother at the kitchen sink. He looks at you like something he's decided to protect, not own. There's a difference. There was a difference. The largest possible difference. The distance between a life given away and a life chosen. "Adrian," she said. "Yes. I want you to know something, for the record, so it's been said clearly." He waited. "I came in here a year ago to make a man jealous," she said. "And instead I remembered who I was, and I fell in love with someone who made it possible to remember faster." She looked at him steadily. "That is not a small thing. That is everything, and I know the difference." He held her gaze. In his eyes was the full, unmanaged truth of him, the Brooklyn boy, and the man who built empires, and the person who funded a little girl's future in silence, and the man who measured her ring size from a box in her jewelry drawer, and the person who had extended his hand to a desperate woman on a dance floor, because something in her was worth seeing. All of it. At once. Completely. "I know you know the difference," he said. "That's why I chose you." "You chose me," she said. "The moment you said, 'I'll decide for myself whether the risk is worth it,'" he said. "I chose you then. I've been catching up to it ever since." She smiled. Fully. The kind that reached everything. "We're even then," she said. "I chose you too." The music played. They danced. The city continued outside, enormous, relentless, full of stories in every direction, none of them simple, all of them ongoing. And on that dance floor in that room where everything had started, two people who had each been not quite known moved together in the complete, uncalculated ease of people who had arrived somewhere real. A woman who had walked in broken and whispered a desperate wish to a stranger had found something far greater than she asked for. A man who had moved through the world behind walls of power and reputation had found the one person whose presence made every wall unnecessary. Sophia Bennett had not been rescued. She had done the work, all of it, every piece, with her own hands and her own mind, and the fierce, patient, undefeatable will of a woman who had been made to feel small and had chosen every single day to grow anyway. And Adrian Valenti, the man feared by criminals, respected by businessmen, known in certain circles as someone who never threatened twice, had been changed by the most unexpected force he had ever encountered. Not power, not danger, not money. A woman who refused to be invisible, who had whispered 4 words to a stranger on a dance floor, and who had meant every single one of them for herself. That was the story. A broken woman walked into a nightclub, hoping to make her past jealous, and instead she found her future. And the man who controlled an empire found the one truth that no amount of power had ever given him. That being truly known by one real person is worth more than being feared by 1,000. That was enough. That was everything. That was the whole, complete, final, undeniable truth.